WaveCon 2024 is going to be here before we know it, August 2nd through the 4th. It is Blind Wave University is the theme this time, and we are hosting it at Marietta College. Remember, tickets are limited and on sale now. Head over to blindwave.com/wavecon to buy your tickets today and enroll in Blind Wave University. Class dismissed.
Down here with these.
What?
Are we all good? Hello, Gonk.
Hello
everybody. Welcome back to Badonka Gonk, where we are going to be talking about, one thing is going to be
Star Wars.
Oh, okay.
We talk about Star Wars here.
Is that what it is?
I think so.
Okay. I was going to say, like, sodas. I
What kind of sodas, though?
Like Dr. Pepper and Wolf soda.
Strap in, everybody. 2 hours. Wolf. I just got that.
Wolf Cola.
All right. Hey, what's up, everybody? We are here for our monthly Star Wars podcast, where we like to come together and just have a fun conversation, because I feel like that's what fandom's supposed to be.
Yeah, sure.
About having fun conversations, even if you don't like something.
I do want to say, like,
Yeah.
one of the things I think that's tough doing this is, like, lots of times we try to talk about, like, all right, what should we talk about for the podcast? Mm-hmm. And sometimes in doing so, I want to talk about more things to try to figure out what to talk about for the podcast.
Yeah.
But then we're like, no, we shouldn't talk about this. We should wait for the podcast.
I understand.
And then we don't get to talk about things until the podcast.
Yeah.
So
you're saying we should do the podcast not just once a month, but every day? What do you mean?
I don't know.
We see each other a lot and talk about Star Wars a lot.
I don't know how much people could handle more Badonka Gonk. I don't know how much Gonk could handle more Badonka Gonk.
He is trying his best at all times.
Sure.
He certainly is, but yeah.
So, okay, Gonk. But we are going to be talking about we're going to be talking about Crashpoint Tower.
The Race to Crashpoint Tower. Yes.
The book that we read for this month. We'll be announcing the next book we're going to be doing, as well as the next Badonka Gonk podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have a conversation we want to have about retcons and our thoughts on retcons.
Yeah.
And then also a conversation about Acolyte. It has finished up.
It
the
has.
whole first season or the whole series, whatever it's going to be, is out now. And we got to talk about it in our reaction recently here on Wave Squadron.
Yeah.
And figure we get to have more conversation now about it, bring some thoughts and questions you guys end up having about Acolyte as well.
Yeah.
And we'll try to filter in some questions throughout the whole stream. So we'll be starting with the book first. So we'll focus on questions regarding the book. I do have one question for the chat at one point when we're talking about it that I want to make sure I ask.
Yeah, and then just at the top of the show too, I think that this is usually, people know this, but we tend to I encourage people to tell me like their thoughts and their opinions about Star Wars. It's literally one of my favorite things to do. But I do feel like, especially the last couple months in the Star Wars fandom, like there's been a concerted effort to attack people, and we are just completely and utterly against that in all forms. So if you're in the chat, or I don't have a problem if you're like, hey, me, I'm upset at Eric. That's fine. Just don't attack people in the chat. People are here to have a good time. That's what Star Wars really is to have a good time. And there's been a lot of really, really not good times lately.
Sure.
So
I do want to hear.
it's really that's the frustrating part.
I want to hear thoughts. I want to hear criticisms. I want to hear enjoyments. But we don't have to be terrible to each other while we talk about that
Absolutely
kind of
not.
stuff. So,
Yeah. I've been
hopefully
having
we
this
do all that
conversation since the prequels, where was being told that, hey, the way that you feel about it, you should change it. And I'm like, that's not how I like to do things,
Sure.
But I like to talk about how things make us feel. So let's start out by talking about how Race to Crashpoint Tower made us feel.
Yeah. Which is a fairly short book.
It's a junior novel.
Perhaps to the detriment, because I feel like sometimes things just went real fast, and I was like, wait, what happened?
Yeah. Now, to preface for anybody that's here that hasn't watched or read any of the High Republic, this book is interesting in that, how sometimes you watch a really cool movie and then they start to franchise and they start to do stuff, and you're like, hey, these characters, this is what they were doing when they weren't on screen.
When they weren't over here at this stuff.
Yeah. So this book is about a very small amount of time between the last book
kind
that
of
we
like
watched.
in the middle of the last
kind
book
of in
that
the
we
middle,
read.
and it's kind of like a side adventure with some of the other characters. So as long as we preface with that, I will agree that there was times where I was kind of like, maybe I brought too much
Sure.
expectation
Yeah,
to it.
well,
but,
especially
like,
the last book.
Yeah, but like what it was a short, sweet novel about some kids.
Yeah, sure.
Doing their part in what is a traumatizing, traumatic event for the High Republic.
Yeah.
You know.
Sure.
Which those two like tones, which is like more junior novel, and just how terrible the event on the Republic Fair was in the last novel.
Mm-hmm.
I thought as I was listening to it, it started to clash for me, but at a certain point, that went away, and I just kind of like embraced it, and I enjoyed it a lot more after that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if that makes much sense, but
Maybe.
you know, it's kind of the clashing tones. It's like watching Andor and then going right into Clone Wars. It's like, hey, something's not. It's not a perfect transition here. You know,
Okay.
There's a tone and there's a feel, and I feel like I felt that a little bit reading the book.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I mean, maybe a little bit. I can get what you mean. There's definitely a point where I'm like, oh, I like what they're doing with this part here.
Yeah.
But no, the book, it's kind of cool because this one is being in the High Republic, but we don't have our comic book readings out yet that we did for the High Republic, which they are
Yes.
coming. They're being worked on, and they'll be out soon.
So these are, we have characters in here from those comic books, and we have experienced them, and we'll get those videos out as soon as we can. But those are a little more, those are harder to get out. We're trying to get now the Acolyte is over, it's a little bit of a break. We'll be able to really schedule that stuff out.
Yeah. So the cool thing with this book is it's pulling a character from, I think, the last junior novel that we read, which was, oh man, I'm spacing on it. Not After Into the Dark.
The last novel that we read?
Not the last one. That was The Rising Storm.
Yeah.
There was a junior novel before that we read. The one that had Vernestra.
Yes. It was called, was it Into the Dark?
No, Into the Dark was before that one.
Okay.
There's another one.
Why am I forgetting it right now?
Test of Courage. That's it. Thank you,
of
Nexus.
Courage. You know what? I'm kind of glad that we've now gotten through a decent amount of the High Republic, and I'm messing up the titles.
Yeah. So I'm like, but it's pulling a character from that
Yeah.
we met, which also shows up in the Acolyte. We're pulling Lula and Zine from some comics and stuff that we've seen already. And also it touches on a little bits of their story from those as well. And then also the Rising Storm being pulled in a little bit into this too, because that's kind of the location is from the Rising Storm. And then we get a few new characters tossed in that we follow along with, which I thought was interesting, kind of like just bringing elements of High Republic all into this book.
Yeah.
And it being a junior novel that, I don't know, possibly for me, like if I was just like, wow, it's a junior novel, like I could imagine myself being like, well, I won't read that one. I'm going to read, these ones here, the adult novels. And maybe I'll go back to that one later on, There's different things in the EU where I'm like, well, I'll read this, but I read those when I was a kid. I'm not gonna read any more of those ones right now. I'm gonna read these ones,
Sure.
So it was neat to see like some of these things kind of culminating, coming together.
It was. I think it's especially having the younger kids being the feature, and then we have the the returning bad guys in the Nihil, but we also have the Dringer in this.
Yeah.
And there was something about having like these younger kids fighting the Dringer that made them scarier to me. And I was trying to figure out why. I feel like especially kids, like you have evolution has done this to us, but you have a fear of the dark, you have the fear of monsters, you have the fear of seeing eyes and teeth, like that pattern, the fear of being eaten. I mean, on Earth, that's how life goes on. You eat other life.
Well, in this, they're like, no, they're plants and they eat people.
Yeah.
Or people!
But they eat people. But it's like, I think the added scariness to me is that, like, I don't eat anything I talk to. Like, the Dringer can talk to you and tell you that they're going to eat you. And they, like, just the way they do it is just so, I don't know, frightening to me as an animal on Earth that is constantly being, like, literally you eat or you are eaten.
When you say talk to, do you mean, like, it talks back and you can actually understand it? As opposed to, like, because, like you said before, you raise cows and I was just thinking, like, you ever be like, all right, come on, little guy, let's get in here. And then later on you eat it,
Yeah, and the way
but
I
this
think
is like,
about
there's a conversation happening with these guys.
Absolutely. And I realize that this is a way bigger topic than just, like, relating it to Star Wars. But, like, when living on a cattle farm, I know that, one, the modern cattle that we have now don't exist in nature. They were bred that way. So it's not like you're depriving an animal of a life that it would have lived, right? But the way that we do it on our farm in Whipple is, one cow feeds our family for a year. We have 500 head of cattle. My dad doesn't do that so he can feed 500 families. He does it so because, one, he enjoys it, and two, like, he is raising that herd, and that herd has gone on since, it's from the same lineage that when my grandpa first bought his cows,
Sure.
And, like, that goes on. That, and that's, I don't know. To me, that's like the beauty of farming is like, yes, you will slaughter one cow, but all these the 599 other ones are going to have a much better life. They're cared for. They're tended. They have pastures just open. They don't have to fear predators, that type of thing. So I understand the difference, but the Dringer are cruel about it. Like if I just like tortured a cow before I killed it and ate it,
Sure.
You ruin the meat if you do that.
Yeah. No, I mean,
yeah, but I don't know. There's just something about the way that the Dringer were like mocking the children as they were about ready to eat them is just very primal to me.
it felt like they look at them as lesser, right? Like that's kind of what it
absolutely.
is. Like they don't look at them as being any kind of equal. So it's like meats,
Absolutely.
talky meats,
Yeah.
too tough to chew, but I'm hungry, Like it was interesting, and I mean we're towards the end of the book with that, but
sure.
I did think that the way they combated the Drengir was interesting compared to the previous times that we've had to fight them.
Yes.
So, but we have our main character, Jamaram, which I was like, okay, that's that's a name.
The Jedi mechanic.
Yeah, the Jedi mechanic.
I like his setup. He's like, I don't want to go to the fair. I just want to work on my bike or whatever he's working on. You know.
He's like,
and then because of that, he's the only Jedi available.
Yeah. So I thought it was interesting. Like this one here, like the Rising Storm happened. If you guys read that one, like there's the terrible attack from the Nihil attacking Valo, and this Jedi happens to be around and gets notification that there's a communications tower that has been disabled or having issues, so he has to go and investigate it.
Yeah.
And this just kind of pairs with like communications being out on Valo and why help doesn't come right away.
Sure.
And this guy's whole adventure is trying to make sure that there can be communications to battle against the Nihil. But with that, he had like a few friends, like the V-18, which I didn't realize right away. It was later that I realized that the cover of the book, like on the Audible thing, is like, wait, is that the robot that he's flying on?
Yes.
And it looks much more like a gunk in a way than it did what I was thinking it looked like.
Sometimes we have Nexus, he's in the chat, who helps us out with the order in which we read things. And one of my favorite things that he does is he provides like images for us sometimes. It's like, hey, this is what this character looks like. And I saw the title of the book, and then I saw the image of the droid, and I was like, it was just cropped small. I'm like, oh, that's them. That's cool. But yeah, I think the utility of being able to ride your droid is great.
Yeah. Well, and even the two little, what were they called? Bombats? Or
yes.
What was, like
they're
those,
like the big bat thing, or the small bat thing.
They're in that picture too, and I didn't realize it right away. And I was like, oh, they're right there. But they're like these little gremlin dudes who help fix up and work on V-18, but they speak some other language, but usually it's just they say rude stuff and we don't know what they're saying. So I thought it was kind of funny with them too.
Good.
But
it had a fun tone that I enjoyed. Eventually enjoyed. I think in the beginning it took me a bit to kind of like get into it.
Sure. No, I get that too. One of the things I liked the most about the book, I think, was like its theme focusing on the idea of the parts to the whole. Like that was a thing. Like his master, Kumpar or something like that. I think Master Kumpar.
That sounds right.
Like had this saying where it was like you must look at the whole, but like each part and understand how it works with it. And one of the things, like you were talking about, the difference in tone.
Yeah.
One moment I really liked in this was when they were kind of, I guess, flying above this disaster of the Nihil attacking Valo, and they were like, we need to save all these people. We're just flying away, and we should help these people and save as many as we can. And he takes a moment to look at the whole, where it's like, we need communication.
Yeah.
We need to be able to get help. We need to be able to contact each other so that we can battle this. For the whole, I need to ignore my want to do this and go do that. And I was like,
get to that tower.
Yeah, and I thought that was a neat
Yeah.
connection to that. And also I feel like they connected it too to the Drengir, looking at parts and what the Nihil does and what the whole is and what are they after.
Sure,
and this deal the Nihil gave, like, you'll get this whole planet if you go and eat this tower, like that was kind of the deal they gave them. And I just thought like that little theme kind of circling around for Ram was done pretty well. Like I mean, it's a junior novel and everything, but I thought it had a nice theme in it.
I really do like that. I wasn't really thinking about that, but yeah, the look at the whole, but you also have to acknowledge the individual parts too, and like how they work together, how those systems work together. Like
which is great for a mechanic. Like that's why he's saying those to him, but it goes further than just being a mechanic for him.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's maybe it might be relevant to our discussion later, where like you have individuals that have feelings about media, and then they go into a system of an algorithm that's designed to pump out engagement, you know?
Sure.
And everything just kind of gets like lost in translation.
Yeah.
I feel like so. A pretty good lesson to learn from our Jedi Master this time.
I thought the story elements that we had with Zine and Lula were good. I like getting a little bit more story with them.
Yeah.
We had, I think they were in 5 comics that we read through. That's coming out soon.
Yeah.
And it also had little mentions to elements of that. They even went to a planet from that being involved. Talked about a person who was missing.
Yeah.
And a lot of that all happened in that comic series. And they referenced that, but them trying to figure out how to battle the Nihil, and they're kind of investigating this and fall into coming to Valo to help because of this communications. Yeah. Which I thought the communication that they did was great. Like Ram trying to figure out how to like mind trick this Nemodian captain.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was fun.
Yeah. It's fun to watch younger Jedi do what we see the other Jedi do, no problem.
Yeah.
Like learning how to do those things, but that was really fun.
Yeah, and just like the way he talked was great too.
And I mean, well, you might have a note for it later, but I really enjoy having a person like around Jedi that's not a Jedi but is a Force user.
Yeah,
like that's so cool.
No, I thought so too. Zine.
Zine, yeah. I mean, from the comics. And
Ram
stuff,
even looks at him like. And he's like, well, maybe I shouldn't say that or anything. He's like, I'm not a Jedi.
Yeah,
you know?
but
like,
it's a great way to like have the Jedi characters be able to like vent in a way they can't to other peers of the Jedi, but also somebody that, hey, when the going gets tough, this person knows how to use their feelings to protect themselves and others.
They're just someone else with Force connection. They're not a Jedi. They're not a Sith. They're just there, but they want to help.
Yeah, I like the idea that despite her being too old or any other reason they're not training her, like she's not abandoned.
Yeah. Well, and her, cool. I believe her people they don't like the Jedi.
Yes, her people hate the Jedi. She was raised to hate them, so there's also that added wrinkle too. Yeah, so she has nowhere to go.
Yeah, her inner struggle there, like she kind of leaves her stuck, you know. So no, I like that as well.
Yeah, sure.
I also like, and I think this is really good, maybe even for a kids novel, maybe for adult novels too. But there was a moment where Lula got to work with Vern.
Yeah.
And I thought it was cool that Vern, I think she's like 16 in this book, because she's like the youngest Jedi Knight that they've had, right?
Sure.
But Lula expecting to be kind of told what to do is given kind of a, what do you want to do? Where should we go? How do we do this?
Yeah.
And like she's kind of given lead by Vernestra.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool. But also there's an element of Lula talking about the envy, that like the jealousy she kind of feels towards Vernestra.
Yeah.
And I was like, in shows and movies and stuff, like there's always a talk about no connections and controlling your emotions and stuff, but that doesn't mean that they don't have it. And I think too, for like kids, like you're gonna have these different emotions and stuff, and it's trying to figure out how to control these and how to lean into them when you can, or how to pull away from it when you shouldn't. And I thought it was interesting.
I've always loved Anakin's episode 2 talk with Padme on the transport to Naboo, where he's talking about like, I thought Jedi forbidden to have love. It's like, no.
It's encouraged.
Love's great. Like that's compassion. That's unconditional love. Like we want that, and we strive to protect it. It's the most important thing for light and life. I've loved that scene. But I think about that often, a lot, with at least the way Anakin, who we know isn't necessarily the perfect Jedi, has that. Despite if he truly believes it or not, like still has that imparting to Padme. I really like that scene. But I think about that often when I think of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What else did I have? We also had a little bit of Ty tossed into this, right?
Yes.
I think that's her name, right? From the first, the Rising Storm. She's the Jedi for hire, the Saber for hire.
Yeah.
But Ram, we had met very briefly in Rising Storm when Ty was in her jail cell.
Yeah, I had to, when I first started reading, I had to be like, wait, I know Ram. Who's Ram again? But that's the thing about, at least for me, is sometimes Star Wars is such a visual language for me that when I'm reading the novels, I have to really work hard for it.
Yeah. So after failing succeeding and failing his mind trick, he ends up getting put in jail.
Yeah.
And is there with Ty and whoever Ty was working for, I forget what the name was. It was like the Dr. Evil scientist person, right? And they're in the cells together and stuff. But we also get a little bit more of Ty after they break out.
Yeah.
And kind of like should we let her go, should we not? But the thing I thought that was really cool was that Ty kind of showed up one more time a little bit later.
Yeah.
And we figured out where the mother of these flying dragon worm things goes. And I was like, oh, because like I remember them talking about like, oh no, there's 3 of them. There's a mom too.
Yeah.
But then like they came back, it's like, oh, you're giving us this dragon. It's like, no, it's mother. And I was like, whoa,
the bigger shadow comes.
Yeah,
over.
the sandball I think is what they're called or something like
Yes.
that. Like I thought that was really neat.
Yep.
But yeah, it was just bringing in Ty, and Ty was one that I was really interested in Rising Storm.
Agreed.
So just trying to get a little bit more of their story, I thought was really cool to have too.
My favorite part of the whole book, at least the one that made me laugh the most, that I had a good time with, was it was towards the end where the droid's like, but if we do that, then you'll take out my vocal cords and I won't be able to speak. And everybody like pauses, and he goes, oh, okay.
Yeah.
It was a very 3PO moment.
Yeah.
It felt like to me. It just felt real classic Star
I think
Wars.
that's too, like I pictured him much more of like a protocol looking kind of
Yeah.
droid. So whenever I was like, I realized like, oh, he looks more like this box.
Yeah, right.
I was like, that's not at all what I thought he
It's
was.
more
you know?
of a personality thing as opposed to,
I also loved, it was around that same time whenever they were, it was the Drengir, and they were like, furry meats with flamethrowers or fire or whatever. I was like, ooh.
That was funny too. Yeah. They're sharing their shiny swords.
Yeah. I had a question for chat because it was towards the end of the book.
Okay.
And this is more so probably for anyone who read it rather than listened to it.
Sure.
Because that was why I had this issue.
Oh, okay. Because we do the audiobook.
Yeah, I've been doing the audiobook for all these. But there's a fight where Lula is fighting Nihil, who are coming on like speeders and spacecraft and stuff. And at one point when they were talking about some of them, and one of them that came in, what they called it was an R-Wing.
Yeah, I remember that.
And my mind initially jumped to Star Fox because they fly R-Wings. And then I was like, wait, no. It's probably like an R-Wing, like an X-Wing or a Y-Wing or something like that. But then I was like, I wonder how they spell it. And I tried to search, and I couldn't figure out what to search to really find this on Google.
Okay.
And I wasn't sure if anyone who actually read the book in chat, like when reading it, was it spelled like an R with wing, or was it spelled like A-R? Because I think R-Wings from Star Fox are spelled A-R wing. So I was wondering how they spelled it.
I thought he said Arwen, like Lord of the Rings.
Okay, they were spelled it R-wing. Okay,
wing.
I was curious on that because I was like, dude, if this is supposed to be like a Star Fox reference, because that's just where my mind first went to. But I'm like, since I can't read it, I don't know how they spelled it. So I don't know if it's probably just like, there's 2 versions of the V-Wing, I think, in between like Star Wars Rogue Squadron and like the prequel era of Star Wars. And I was like, it might just be one of those things. But I thought about that when they first said R-Wing. I was like, wait, they say an R-Wing? But
is it to imply that Arabesh, like the main language of Star Wars, like do they call letters the same as we call them? Their letters are different. But like you can also, and I've seen people do this, and I've done it a little bit too. Like you can kind of look at Arabesh and be like, oh, I see it. I can read it actually a little bit.
I want to study it a little bit more to try to like just read it right offhand. But
Sure.
yeah, you can kind of see it a little bit.
I just wonder if like, do they call that an X? And it looks like this, and then they're looking at. I don't know.
Like here's the letter in Arabic, but they say X.
See,
I don't know.
It's fun details like that. That one, why would anybody ever talk about that? It's a movie. Shut up. But 2, like you can sometimes find what appears to be a contradiction in how a thing is presented, and you can either like say, "Oh, it sucks now," or you can be like, "Well, how can we make it work?"
Gotcha.
I don't know. I kind of find how can we make it work to be far more fun.
More fun.
Yeah.
Sure. I get what you mean.
Yeah.
Nexus says that it's high galactic.
High galactic
is what
is like English.
Is what the English like letters are.
Yeah.
So high galactic versus.
I always love that Dragon Ball Z abridged moment when Nails they're like, he's speaking Namekian and Frieza, and the Frieza's like, I can't understand you. What are you saying? Like, fine, I'll speak in the universal language. And he goes, English.
Universal language of the galaxy or whatever. Yeah.
Gotcha.
But no, overall, like I thought the book, like I don't have a ton to say. I thought the book was done fairly well. I thought it was a really good, like junior novel. I like a lot of the themes they had with it. I'm excited about one was Ram wanting to branch out from his mechanic job on this planet and actually go and visit like the galaxy. So he wants to go with like Zine and Lula and expand out with that. And I'm like, okay, well that'd be cool because we'll get to see him more in other aspects of the High Republic, maybe in the next novels or whatever, or maybe even the comics. But I also thought like for the Drengir, like I'm pretty sure they kind of talked with them and was like, hey, can you go fight the Nihilists instead because they kind of lied to you? And I was like, man, I don't think we've really had that battle for like with the Drengir. I don't think we've ever had that happen. And it was like these kids talked these Drengir into doing something else.
Yeah.
And I was like,
they did.
okay, well that was interesting. Well, I have not seen that before, so I thought that was pretty cool for a moment in this book.
And again, I just terrified the Drengir because they were all pissed off that the Nihil were like killing people. Like, no, you said we could eat them. They're all mad.
they were mad that they were killing people when it's like they're ruining our meats, you know. So no, it was kind of funny, but also like it's also kind of scary at the same time. So I get that.
Yep. Yeah, fun book. I'm ready to sink my teeth back into something a little meaty.
Something meat.
Meat. Yes. We got Star Wars Explained in the chat.
Oh, Star Wars Explained. Thank you so much.
Molly, but
I didn't get to read what they said here. Gonk, do you want me to check that part out there?
I think they're talking to the good people at YouTube that are having a lively debate.
Oh, awesome. All right. Just keep it nice in the chat, guys.
Yeah, keep it cool in the chat. We're here to have a fun time. Regardless of your opinions, it's still cool to have a fun conversation that's not super heated.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But for the next book, do you want to say that now?
So the next book we'll be covering is going to be Battlefront 2 Inferno Squad. Now, this is going to be a book much like the Rogue One novel, Catalyst, that we read. People read Catalyst and then went and saw Rogue One in theaters. You could read Battlefront 2 and then go play the game. And I don't know if it's necessarily intended that way, because it's Star Wars. You can come at it from any direction, you know.
Sure.
But from what I understand, most people, when this came out, read it first and then played the game. So I'm going to go into it with that mindset this time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I might have to.
I'm excited for it.
Either replay or kind of like get a story again.
Yeah.
To kind of see.
Battlefront 2. Yeah, Battlefront 2. Like story stuff.
Yeah.
It's small. You know, like it's not like the most robust, but it has some really fun moments and really fun characters that I'm hoping I get to see more of.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right. So Battlefront next time.
Yep.
Inferno Squad.
All right, so we're going to be jumping into some other stuff.
Well, let's check some Q&As real quick to make sure there's nothing that we missed from Race to Crashpoint.
Oh, yeah, okay, sure.
And then after we're done with these questions, we'll open up questions for our next talk about retcons and stuff. We do have a super chat from Raludum. Hopefully I said that right. I love Star Wars and always will. I haven't enjoyed most of Disney Star Wars. I love Rebels, Bad Batch, Mando, Tales of, and Ahsoka.
Yeah.
No bad show or film has ruined or killed it for me, and I never attack people for thinking differently. May the Force be with you.
I mean, it's a good attitude to have. You know, Star Wars is it's not a single book. It's a library. You know, and like I don't like hate the library for every book in it, or as I judge it as a whole. So I think it's a healthy attitude to have. I mean, there are certainly things in every Star Wars property I don't enjoy. You know, but I tend not to like up my meanness factor to communicate to other people I don't enjoy it. You know?
Sure.
So I appreciate that. That's cool. Thank you. And thank you for the support.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm going to look for Q&As here. These are more for Race to Crashpoint, so if there's anything else for other stuff, we'll look at those later on. Nexus says, how did you feel about the conversations between Vernestra and Lula regarding Vernestra's prodigy status and Lula's attachment? Love that stuff, which I did kind of touch on a little bit. I think that's some of the jealousy and stuff that she had for Vernestra and like how quickly she's moving through everything. But I did enjoy that as well. That was one of the parts of the book that really kind of stood out to me, was really touching on that kind of stuff.
It's really cool. I mean, we just talked a second ago about like seeing Star Wars from different angles, and like you can come at different directions. Some kids might watch the Clone Wars first, or we had someone talk about how Rebels was their first thing they ever watched.
Yeah, which was
Vernestra Rowe. Now that we've watched the Acolyte and we kind of see like where she is there, it's really fun to compare here and imagine the arc, the journey of how she got from here to there. And I don't know, I've been enjoying that part of the High Republic, especially when comparing it with the Acolyte, because you don't get a whole lot of like oh, the High Republic, where you can be really super rewarded watching this show. You get a little bit,
Sure.
like mention of the hyperspace disaster and
Yeah.
stuff. But by design, you don't need to.
Yeah,
It's just,
it has to be
you go right
disconnected enough that you don't have to know that. That way
Yeah.
you can get people who don't read the books
as
involved.
much
in
as the prequel
enjoying.
trilogy must, in reverence, reference the original trilogy. It also must be a movie on its own,
Sure.
a trilogy on its own.
Yeah, you
That
want the
type of
prequel
thing.
trilogy to be like for
Yeah.
the next generation, and then hopefully they watch the original trilogy as
Yeah.
well. But if they haven't, you don't want them to be too lost.
I've always respected that about George, is that he's always making a thing for the people now, not necessarily making a thing for the people then.
Sure.
And he gets in a lot of trouble for that. He went through a lot of grief because of that. But I think it eventually it lasts.
Yeah.
Because he has something to say. I really enjoyed that part.
Yeah, I agree. Next it says, what did you think of Ram's Droid V18? I loved his constant upgrades. Reminded me of a stupid character my GM created in our D&D game, LOL.
And that's from
Star Wars Explained on YouTube.
Gotcha.
Oh, thank you, Nexus.
Thank you so much. I love that droid.
I was surprised whenever I realized that it was on the cover of the book and stuff.
Yeah.
But no, I definitely liked him. He did have a very 3PO kind of vibe about him in the way he talked and, like you said, the one joke and stuff they made. But each time he came back, like, I just thought it was so funny where it's like, oh, here's what new thing. Now he's got wings and missiles and a flamethrower. Oh, wait, you put an engine on a droid? Like the mechanical upgrades that. I guess more so it was the Bombats that did it, and I like those little guys too. So it's like that's a little team, and I enjoyed that little trio a lot.
Yeah,
that was a lot of fun.
I loved the upgrading nature of the droid, and honestly, I enjoyed it so much that I was kind of thinking while I was reading about how R2 as an astromech, the way they're designed. I mean, we have to remember too. In 1977, that's just what it looked like. There wasn't a whole lot of thought put into why he looks that way. But the idea is that an astromech can be socketed into other things, right?
Yeah.
But we see that so rarely. They go into ships, and they Mandalorian one time had lava battle bot that an astromech was in.
Oh, yeah.
But I always thought, is it kind of like a missed opportunity not to have more astromech slots? I mean, they're their extender arm thing will go in and interact with everything. Yeah, but I just always thought it'd be cool to have more of that in Star Wars.
Like more, what do you mean? More?
I don't really know.
Like more?
I was just tickled. I delighted when I saw that thing you could put your astromech in, and now it can walk around and do more utility work. Maybe you could have here. It's like
you want more.
It's like an accessory for your phone. Here's the load lifter version that you can have. Here's the maintenance. You want it's loadout.
Astromechs can dock into things and do something different, right?
Yeah.
Like there's one that looks what is it, Mandalorian, where it's it looks like an astromech on a land speeder. It's pushed into there, right?
Yeah.
So you see the little dome, but you could have him doing all kinds of stuff.
Sure.
But
yeah,
I don't know. I don't know why they don't do that. It'd be kind of cool. And then you can just make things where it fits all. But then you got to make sure it's universal.
Yeah.
USB-C.
But thanks for the question.
Shad Vizla, thank you so much for the super chat. It says, "Hey Squadron, just want to show my support, and I'm happy I can come here and not be called shill for enjoying Acolyte despite its flaws. Eric, you're my favorite member."
Ha! Sorry.
Sorry, Gonk. Thanks for being my safe haven for Star Wars nowadays. Poor Gonk.
Really appreciate that. Slightly disappointed that there's not more of those spaces.
Sure.
I have no problem with people being like, hey, this one didn't work for me. I didn't like it. Here's all the reasons why. But I don't understand the need for people to want to not only do that, but they got to be real fucking mean about it. And hey, I'm not saying everybody that's negative does this at all. The people that I have a problem with in the last couple of months is 1% of the fandom.
Sure.
It's just that 1%.
They're loud.
They're
right?
Well, they're loud, and they also it performs super well in the algorithm, so you're going to see it way more.
I think they're loud, and I think it overshadows people just have general criticisms and stuff.
Yeah.
So,
But, like, I don't know. We had our video about the things we hate about Star Wars, and I've, for years, it was like, the Blacksaber, I don't like that look of it. I have my weird stuff about,
Inquisitor sabers.
The
You don't
Inquisitor
like that.
saber, the lightsaber effect, even in the Acolyte.
You have a lot of
where
lightsaber hate on Star Wars.
Well, I've spent literally maybe 1,000 hours rotoing lightsabers, so I have a weird time investment with
Sure.
it. But I tend to feel that when I bring that up, a lot of people will enjoy that when that happens. Oh, Eric's going to hate this, So, like, even if I really don't like something, I don't try to make that the reason people come in a negative way. When I don't like something, I'm generally kind of cool about it. I'm like, hey, yeah, I didn't like that part. Here's the reasons I didn't like it. But if anybody else did like it, I'm good for you. And in fact, I'm kind of jealous.
Sure.
I feel like that's not necessarily. I'm not at all saying this is the right way to
Sure.
go about things. But there is there's a weird need for people to like, hey, I want you to one, say something you don't feel, and then be mean about it too. So
Sure.
yeah,
I get you.
The calling us like people of like Disney shills is.
I've had
strange.
the Porg hate for a while kind
Yeah.
of thing, and I think a lot of people also enjoyed kind of just like
Yeah,
having fun with that aspect.
dude, you
And
got sent like a literal army of porgs.
I got an army of
because of
porgs.
that.
I had porg leggings sent to me,
Uh-huh.
like all kinds of porg stuff, and it was fun. And it was
Yeah.
it was all. I feel like it was all in good fun. But I'm not gonna like if someone's like, I love the porgs. Why do you hate them? I'm like, that's fine. Just
Sure,
sometimes
yeah.
sometimes I don't need them there in the
Yeah.
way, eating the ship.
What'd you think of the
mess.
little dudes with the little trunks that were with Kamir?
I mean, I think they were
They
cool.
were porg.
They
were kind of like
there.
porgs and
They were-
Phylene sirens mixed together from Octu.
Yeah.
If you take the sirens and their noses thing,
Yeah.
so
like those things grow up and split.
Yeah.
And that was Octu. That's
That-
what,
yeah,
that's what that was.
simply in 100 years, that's
Yeah,
what happened.
That's what happens. You just need 100 years. That's all you need. So
Yeah. But I not only do I love those little birds, I love that they just did it practically and they just kind of like shook them
yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah.
Magic.
Yeah. They kind of looked a little,
Yeah,
I don't know, rockish,
yeah.
but it was okay.
It's my favorite type of magic. It's like when you know you're being tricked and you still believe it. Oh, I love that stuff.
But guys, I don't think there's any more questions for Race to Crash Point really
Yeah.
specifically. There's a lot of questions in there about other things that we can talk about here in a few, but we're going to jump into some discussions about retcons in general.
Yeah.
I just want to kind of like, one, I know some people have kind of talked about like what our thoughts are on different retcons and things, but also like I kind of wanted to talk about what I feel are retcons to me versus like this part of it kind of came up when I was starting to kind of look into like, well, what kind of retcons have happened? Because Acolyte, a lot of people were like,
Sure.
oh, they're retconning and changing this, and I don't like it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I know there's been more retcons than just what Acolyte's done through Star Wars, and I don't know if there's been as much like loud noise about it. So I'm curious what there is. And some of these
Now, when you
things-
say retcon, because generally retcon is retroactive continuity.
Sure.
And it's not necessarily like,
yeah, go ahead.
it's not a canon break.
Maybe, maybe not. Like, I don't know.
Like a
that's-
retcon-
As I was looking through
yeah.
these, some of these things, I'm like, yes, I feel like that's a retcon.
Same.
And then there's other things that pop up, and I'm like, I don't necessarily feel like
Yeah.
that's a retcon.
Yeah.
And that's what I kind of also want to talk about is like what I feel is a retcon to me in Star Wars and what isn't. At least to me. I know some people are going to be like, no, that's a retcon, and that's why this is what it is. So, but yeah.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I will have this conversation, but there's a certain part of me that's like, I don't think it matters too much.
I get what you mean.
I just want to, I literally don't care. I only care about how a piece of media makes me feel.
Sure.
That's why I'm here.
But a
you know?
retcon can change how you
And
feel about a piece of media, right?
It really can, but because I was doing the same thing, I was trying to go through like a list of like, okay, what is a true retcon? What is a true canon break? And there were often times where I could defend both of those at the same time because this is fiction and there's no actual real boxes we're putting things in.
No,
we're
sure.
making up boxes and putting stuff in, you know? So there's going to be a looseness anyway, which I really liked what Rick had to say yesterday when the Acolyte is like, if you've liked Star Wars, where's this demand that everything must make sense?
Sure, because there's tons of times where it's kind of like, well, I don't get why it is.
Yeah,
you know?
sure.
Like I think the biggest retcon that has been argued for the longest
Okay.
is probably Han shot first.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like I think that's probably a retcon because it was clearly this, and then it was literally changed because there's a lot of stuff in the special editions that I'm like, okay, that's fine. I don't care.
Yeah.
I love that you made the snow speeder look better so you can't see the AT-AT through it. I love that you added some more to Bespin. You added some more to Tatooine. You know, you gave me a little bit more Wampa. Sure, that's really cool too.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest changes I think that happened is Han not shooting first or moving his head a little bit, you know, or shooting at the same time, or, you know, like that's been such a thing that I feel like they've changed it a couple times now.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of, for me, I think that's the biggest retcon because it's also like, well, how far will this character go? Is he going to wait for you to shoot first or is he going to shoot first? And I think that's kind of why people debate it so much.
Lucas did it because he wants you to feel slightly differently about Han Solo than he thinks you felt about him the other way, right?
Yeah,
And
I
he's
would
changed
imagine
it a
so,
couple
yeah.
times. He doesn't like that Han just comes in and just shoots this guy. You know what? Like, I'll if you want to call it a retcon or if you want to call it just like a change or whatever, like I will just grant that because it's the original author doing it.
Sure.
A lot of the things that are on my lists are also things that George Lucas came up with.
Yeah.
But they're wildly different than what was presented, you know?
Okay.
And if, like, let's say, we know that George Lucas didn't have anything to do with the Acolyte. But let's say he did. Let's say, like, he was like, oh, yeah, those are all my ideas, you know? Would that change things for people? Or are people, like, being like, no, I know what George Lucas thinks.
I don't think it would because I feel like there was that much, maybe it wasn't as loud because of the internet, but there was a lot of conflict on the prequels, and that's all George, you know?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, so maybe I guess it doesn't matter then.
Yeah, I don't think the George, like, George knows what he's doing and they're ruining what George did. People said George was ruining what George did, you know? There were people mad that there were Ewoks in Return of the Jedi back when that came out.
Remember that letter I showed you of the president of the Star Wars fan club who just watched Empire Strikes Back and said, this movie has ruined the show for me and I will never watch Star Wars again?
I think I remember, we were talking about that at one point, yeah.
Well, I mean, but that's valid if that's the way that person felt because of it, you know?
Yeah.
Like, the way that I feel about it years and years later with way more investment than that guy, he just had one movie, you know?
Sure.
But he probably obsessed about that one movie.
Yeah, some people have, like, their whole life, they've watched and enjoyed Star Wars,
Yeah.
so I understand why it means so much to so many people.
Sure. Yeah.
And I imagine, like, I want to imagine that the majority of people who are loud and upset are because they care so much about it and they want to enjoy it so much.
Yeah.
I just wish it was in a better capacity.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, I enjoy the passion that people have.
Sure.
It's just that sometimes, like, just because you're passionate about something doesn't mean that you should be rude.
Sure.
You know?
No, I get you.
Or, you know, have to create conspiracy theories to rationalize how somebody's you know, like, there was a lot of comments for us being like, you guys are shills, like Disney's paying you, and I just want to be like, man, I wish, because that ain't happening.
Yeah.
And that's just facetious. Obviously, I don't wish it. I enjoy just, you know, going.
I enjoy enjoying stuff.
I enjoy enjoying stuff.
So as far as retcons, you said that you had a list of a few ideas too.
Yes.
Because I have a couple things too, and I wanted to kind of talk about some of them, but I don't want to. I want to make sure that you get to talk about some stuff too.
Gotcha.
Of what you think.
Well, I guess like.
Oh, Gonk is letting us know. Lucas sent in a super chat as well.
Lucas.
Thank you so much, Lucas. Been watching Star Wars with you guys since 2015. Thanks for sharing the love for the franchise when I had no one to share it with. Hope to meet you guys someday. Cheers from Brazil.
Lucas, man, that makes me feel so good. We get those messages a decent amount where people will say like, I really like these things, but I don't have somebody like in my life that does it. And obviously that shouldn't stop you from looking from somebody in your life that does it, because just me and you, no cameras, I love watching Star Wars with you, you know?
And we can just talk about it for
and
however long.
as cool as it is to get those messages, that's nothing compared to like watching it with somebody. Which is why I crave our reaction setups sometimes. I just have such a fun time watching things with you. Maybe you guys are the reasons that I don't see all the bullshit people don't like.
Maybe.
Your fault.
Dylan also gave a super chat. Thank you so much, Dylan. My biggest problem with the retconning is how it was done. For example, having the guy who said that the Sith haven't been around for 1,000 years present doesn't sit well with me.
I can understand that, Dylan. I think that's actually the point. By having that guy say it, like literally the guy that must say there are no Sith, that right there, when you think about the finale and how things kind of like resolved, well, yeah, I mean, he just heard about this over here. The Jedi as a whole, though, like Coyote Mundi, nothing. You know?
Yeah, no, there's, and we can get into that more with Acolyte in general, but
Yeah.
I do think that that's kind of the point of why it's wrapped up in, like he is supposed to be wrong there, and that's kind of the story that we're going with is the fall of the Jedi and that they're infallible.
And while I think that was
Non-infallible?
more of the intended point, as opposed to like some mistake that like no one at Lucasfilm realized, like, oh my God, he has a line, you know?
Oh wait, he said that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Could you imagine that?
Yeah. Just because that's like how I feel about it doesn't mean that the way that you feel about it is wrong or invalid or anything. They very well could have, would have, should have. Like they could have just used a different character and to do the exact same thing. And it's not Kayani Mundi, and you're not bringing all this stuff in there. But for me, that didn't really matter. And also, as a person that, you know, Star Wars Explained is here, Alex and Molly, a person that spent just a small amount of time studying Star Wars for a trivia show, Kayani Mundi's age never came up. And I got to tell you, the minutia that I went into, Aaron, for that trivia show
Trying to figure out
is
information.
ridiculous. And Kayani Mundi's age was never even, like, a part of it.
That's
so
funny,
I just, you know, if someone really cared about it, I've yet to actually feel like I've met someone that does. But if they really do, I understand.
Yeah.
You know, that makes sense to me.
And then Benjamin B, also with another super chat. Thank you so much. What you said earlier about how can I make this fun is exactly the attitude I have with Star Wars.
Yeah.
Mundi being present, cool. That's probably on purpose. How can it be fun? Kamir no Plagueis, sweet.
Yeah.
Maybe he is Darth Venomous. Maybe. I think there's a lot of story and stuff that we can get into and stuff. And I'm excited to talk about a lot more Acolyte stuff here in a few. But
Yes,
we're going to finish talking about retcons.
So, like, obviously, I think about stuff like Padme, Leia.
Leia. Yeah.
Leia remembering Padme.
She's really sad.
Like, that's not even necessarily a retcon. I feel like that's a continuity break.
Sure.
You know? You're not, like, patching something up. You are straight up, like...
Yeah, it's like that one does feel like you forgot about what Leia said in episode 6, and then you had this happen in episode 3. It's like, how is she supposed to feel like that?
Almost everything else on my list is just like, there's no reason this couldn't happen, you know?
Sure.
But I do kind of like to think about, because I talked about the whole, like, if Lucas was involved or not. Because let's say something like Darth Maul.
Darth Maul.
Darth Maul died. Lucas, I feel like, not only killed him, but he chopped him in half and threw him down an endless hole to say he is dead.
Yeah.
Now, if George Lucas was not involved with the Clone Wars, if in fact it wasn't his idea to bring Darth Maul back, and someone else did, I think that people would have been way more upset. I mean, people were already kind of upset. There's a lot of people that were like, what, Darth Maul? That's dumb.
Sure.
Then they watch and they realize, oh, wow.
This is one of the coolest things I've seen in Star Wars.
I just hire Sam Witwer and he tells you why it's cool.
Yeah,
you know?
No, it's great. I love that.
and
Which
I
I think is one of the biggest retcons in Star Wars as well.
Yeah, but there's that, for me, there's that kind of thing where it's like, well, if it wasn't George that came up with that, then suddenly the narrative of this coming up is that, you're going against what Lucas wanted. He threw that guy in an endless pit, cut in half. He didn't want him to come back, but Lucas will change his mind and be like, here's the story I want to tell now. People really seem to like this guy. Hell, all right, let's go with it.
Yeah.
And then poor Dave Filoni has to sit there and actually make it work.
Yeah, right? No. I mean, Boba Fett fell in a pit, also survived, you know? He was a little different, but it happened.
Yeah. Well, I think the big difference between something like Boba Fett and even to a point Palpatine is that the idea that they survived their supposed deaths has been in at least the fandom consciousness for decades.
Sure. Well,
you know?
I remember seeing artwork about the idea of like Maul coming to Obi-Wan on Tatooine and fighting. Yeah, there being was an idea before Clone Wars did it.
It was specifically a comic book called Visionaries, and what that was, it was a really cool project. It's
like a what if kind of idea, right?
Yeah, not really. What it was the concept artists that worked on the prequel trilogy were given the opportunity, like, hey, don't have to worry about canon, you don't have to worry about anything, but you guys are steeped in the visual of Star Wars. Make a 6-page story. I don't care what you do. You can do whatever you want. One guy was like, I think it'd be cool if Darth Maul came back, and he did it out, and like that design, the robot legs, like that informed what comes later.
Yeah, I'm sure it
in
influenced
the canon version and stuff. But that happens with Thrawn, that happens with Palpatine, that happens with a lot of stuff where we can take these legends and inspire the new stories for people that don't know the legend stories.
Yeah,
you know.
I know. I definitely like Darth Maul is one that I have on here where him living is like, I think it's a huge retcon, but I think it's things that people enjoyed too, and like, that one I feel like is one of the bigger ones. One I had that I saw people talking about being a retcon that I don't think I agree with is the inhibitor chips inside clones.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I saw that being like a conversation about this being a retcon, and I'm like, I feel like
I think it's a retcon.
Really? Yeah. I felt like it was more of like, and that's one of the things. Like retcon, I was trying to like look in, like, what is a retcon? And it's like, well, when you believe it's X, but then now you get more information to believe it's Y. And for me, I was just like, oh man, the clones did this. Okay, so Palpatine just really controls these clones. Yeah. But I felt like rather than a retcon, it was more so informing why it happened, not changing any of my thoughts on anything. I fully believe Darth Maul was dead. Yeah. And then him living really changed how I felt about that one.
Do you believe that when George Lucas wrote Order 66 for Episode 3, he had the idea of inhibitor chips? Or was it just the clones follow orders?
I don't think he did, but I don't know.
I would say that if he didn't, then adding to it later is retroactive continuity. Retroactive continuity doesn't imply things have changed. It just means that something that you didn't know before, now you know this. It doesn't imply a contradiction. But it might imply a contradiction in terms of the author's intent at the time.
So that makes any future movie for Star Wars it always retcons the previous one, right?
Star Wars is a living mythology. It's not just written down. We have to go and discover it. Star Wars is being made, you know?
Because like another one is like Obi-Wan at one point says like, go to Dagobah and you'll learn from the master who trained me, right?
Yeah.
We never see Yoda train Obi-Wan.
Sure.
We see his master was Qui-Gon Jinn.
But you had that implied thing, so like with the Bear Clan scene in Episode 2, that like Yoda actually trains all the children at a certain point.
Yeah, but is that what it is, or is that like a retcon too? Because like, well, now you're kind of changing a little bit. Like, I'm sure when he wrote that, he's like, yeah, this is his Jedi master. And then later on, when we did the prequels, he's like, you know what? Yeah. His master's Qui-Gon Jinn, and we're gonna kill him and do this.
I would say yes, and that's that's not a bad thing. Like a retcon is retroactive continuity is there's no judgment on if it's like it was a good or a negative thing. It's just it just is a thing. So I would say that's a retcon because I don't think that Lucas had figured it out yet. And then later when he figures it out, changes the meaning of what he means. It's not that I studied with Yoda as his apprentice for 20 years. It could now just mean like he's the Grandmaster, so he's kind of like the dad to us all.
Sure. I guess for like the inhibitor chips,
continuity.
The things that gets me is that for me, I feel like it informs me why they turn. It doesn't change my thoughts beforehand of like they turn and they attack, you know?
The utilization is the same.
Yeah, all of it, like the Han shooting first, like there's changes there that I feel differently about it than I did before. For me, this one here is just like now I have more information as to why that is.
And and honestly, and this is my opinion, but not just more information, it's way better. Like, I love the idea that it's not just the clones follow orders because they were bred that way. Like, they actually have loyalty. They have their own designs, their own wants and desires and dreams. Like, we learn about that in the Clone Wars. It's not that they're just clones of the perfect warrior. They are individual creatures in the Force, you know? I love that the Clone Wars, like, taught us that.
Yeah.
And then after Rex is like in tears crying like we're men, not droids, men. And then Palpatine with this insidious chip plan turns them into droids and they are not men in that. And that's beautiful. And I wish that were in a movie.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
But it's not. It's supplemental material. I have no problem with supplemental material because again, living mythology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was just one of those things where like for me I never felt like it was, but I can understand why people would say it is.
Yeah, sure.
And a similar one was I saw like retconning with R2-D2, where one is the gadgets he has, where like in Episode 2 he uses rockets and flies around.
Sure.
And then it's like, well, in the original trilogy, he never uses that. Why didn't he use that when he gets off like the X-wing on Dagobah or at some point in Bespin?
Or, they got old.
You know, like
they never got replaced. You want to be like, that's the first thing I would replace.
Maybe, yeah. But like, so like, it's one of those things.
Like,
it's not answered. It's just he doesn't have those anymore. Yeah. It's kind of similar with like how much like Obi-Wan tends to forget in the original trilogy with what we've seen in the prequels.
You know what would have been better, Aaron?
What?
If R2 went into like a dongle that flew for him.
Don't put him in a.
That way he can't always fly. It's just when he has the accessory.
Do you know how
I'm telling you, man, I'm on to something.
You know how much those droids were automatically from the Jawas, let alone having to buy accessories for them all?
And just think about the markups you can give, like the packages as you're selling this. Like, you want this brand new? R2, baby, you get the flying dongle, you get the the tread dongle,
If you say dongle one more time,
swamp dongle.
damn it. Eric. But on you get no dongles, gone.
Get him a dongle.
No dongles. That chat's going crazy too.
Right.
The R2 aspect of like Obi-Wan. Like Obi-Wan, it's like I don't remember ever owning a droid, but like there's aspects where I'm like, man, I really thought Obi-Wan, given like especially Clone Wars, especially like the prequels, like you think he'd remember R2D2, you know?
Well,
but like
even if it's because the thing people say is like, well, that's just how people feel about droids. They don't really,
Sure.
Do you remember your phone if you see it 10 years later? It's like, I might not,
maybe not, no. But I might be like, dude, I used to have one just like this.
But you know what I would remember? Because like, put your phone up with the Bulbasaur thing right there. If in like
if they can see it, can you see this?
Yeah, I don't know if you can or not. But if in 20 years I see a phone like that, you know what I will think of? My friend Aaron. I feel like Obi-Wan might not remember R2 because he doesn't remember droids, but he knows Anakin, and Anakin loved that droid. So yeah, it's a little bit of it's weird to have him be like, I don't know this guy is.
Yeah, like that's a weird one.
Yeah, it's a weird one.
So I don't know. And another one that I like that I feel is a retcon is Anakin gaining an apprentice.
That was my next one.
Is that your next one?
Yeah. Dude, the vitriol and it's why I still, I think it's just louder now because of social media and like everybody like has the ability, but man, people were so angry when that happened. And they weren't just saying like, oh, Disney ruined Star Wars. There was George Lucas ruined Star Wars.
See, I think the thing with it too, because I feel like that's turned around a lot now, right? From where it started, right?
Yeah.
Same with Darth Maul.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times what you need to see how the story plays out with a lot of that to know like I understand like you have there's a natural instinct to like withdraw and to pull back and be like, I don't like that.
Yeah.
But I think especially with storytelling, especially with, like you said, the living mythology of Star Wars, like seeing where the story goes with a lot of it, like give it some time and see what story they want to tell. And then like that same thing I felt with Acolyte, where it's like, I'm not going to hate this on episode 1. I don't know enough about it in episode 1. I want to see where the story is going to go. Well, and then once it's fully done, I can really talk about like, here's what I do like, here's what I didn't like.
Yeah, as a viewer, you're only expected to do one thing, and that's to suspend your belief. Like you go to a wrestling show, like the dicks in the crowd, like, hey, this is all fake. Like imagine going to a movie and being like, this isn't real.
No, this is real.
Sure. You're meant to go in there with suspension of belief. So yeah, when things like that happen, I go like, okay, well if I suspended my belief and thus believe all of this is in the moment true, I'm gonna wait and see how this works because I feel like that doesn't work.
Sure.
And for me, that's an exciting feeling. I like being pointed somewhere on the map and then getting there. That's a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
But if you have not enjoyed, I'm trying to steel man the other side, right? If you haven't enjoyed a lot of straw man and steel man,
okay,
like a straw man you can beat up because it's easy. Steel man, if you try to beat up, it hurts because
Okay, sure.
So if I'm trying to bolster the other side, I can understand like, hey, I didn't like the sequel trilogy. I didn't like this. I haven't liked anything Star Wars happen. I'm going into the Acolyte and I'm just jaded and I don't want to. I'm not enjoying it. I'm not going to suspend my belief as easily as the person that has enjoyed all those things.
Sure.
But I would maybe posit that who's that on in terms of like the viewer and what responsibility you have as a viewer, which is to have at least the grace to say like, okay, work with me. I'm 100%. Again, I know I have to keep saying it because when people hear those type of things, they think that you're talking about them and they're going to attack. Like this is a very small group of people that I've seen not suspend their belief and not come at a story with grace.
Sure. I understand what you said. I do want to say I think it's a disbelief, right?
Yeah.
It's a suspension of disbelief.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
I wanted to kind of correct that real quick.
No, you're right.
It was ringing in my ears, and I was like, no, I got to say this real quick. But, it's like you want to suspend not believing in it.
I could be super pedantic and say, like, well, technically it is still true because I have beliefs, and if I suspend it and to have the fictional ones,
but if you're
then I'm suspending my actual beliefs.
But if you're suspending your belief, then you're disbelieving. So I think you got to suspend your disbelief. Yeah. But, no, I get what you mean. Like the
look at the whole and look at the parts.
Sure. No.
So the Ahsoka, I think, is the one that
Yeah.
I would call that a retcon. I think a lot of people, even especially older fans around the time of the Clone Wars coming out. That was what
2005,
August 2008. I think
2007?
I think it was 2008 was when a Clone Wars movie came out.
2005 was episode 3.
Yes, sir.
So yeah, so
May
it was 2000. Yeah, 2007, 2008.
And it was
I think
like
when Clone Wars
August
came out.
18th or something like that for the Clone Wars movie. And yeah, I remember people just being like super upset, like there's no way he would have had an apprentice. But it's fun to compare that now and just the love people have for that character. And
Oh, sure.
And almost I think that you can still go back and see people that don't like Ewoks. You can still people that really hate Jar Jar and stuff like that. Like stuff that people have kind of like backed off on or cooled off on. But you don't really see that for Ahsoka much. I only really see it when people are like, oh, Dave Filoni doesn't kill his character, so they go on forever. But like in terms of like Anakin just having a Padawan in general, I feel like people have just completely cooled off on it.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah.
I get you. Like Jar Jar is one I hear a lot
Yeah.
where people still just like Jar Jar.
Mm-hmm.
But no, what I used to hear on like Ahsoka, I don't hear as much anymore.
Yeah.
So.
And it's not even just Ahsoka, because there were people that like, I'm fine with him having an apprentice, but she's annoying,
Yeah.
Or it's a girl and they're trying to shove it down my throat, that type of thing. Just the idea that he had an apprentice at all,
Yeah.
is like kind of like, because I'm trying to remember if there was an assumption or maybe even in Legends idea of a Jedi Knight doesn't take a Padawan, you have to be a Jedi Master or something like that. And I think that kind of like shook up that idea
Maybe.
back there in the 2000s.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah.
But I could definitely see that thing being a thing.
Yeah.
I do want to see if there's any questions related to any kind of retcon type of
Yes,
stuff.
sir.
We do have. Okay. Well, if there's one of those, I can read those too, Gunk. There is a super chat from. There's a few super chats, so let me see. Mr.
All right, we'll cover them.
C. Gilly. I'm not sure if I said that right, but thank you.
Mr. C. Gilly.
Thank you. Hi, guys. Huge fan of yours and Star Wars, and I feel the structure was the main issue. I think they could have done episode 3 and 7 as one episode.
Yeah.
It feels like a film turned into a series.
Yeah.
Also excited for Outlaws.
Ooh, Outlaws. I do kind of agree. I do, there is a part of me that thinks that it's really easy to like stand on this side of the creative process and say like you shouldn't have done that and that and that and that and that, but those are things that you don't really discover until you've done it, which is why when you're trying to master a skill or like screenwriting or directing or anything, they say like you gotta get the first 10,000 hours out because you'll get all your bad ideas out of the way, and then you can go. I don't know. I agree with that, except the bad ideas thing. Like even if I don't like an idea, I can see that being a part of this person's expression, and I can accept that. And I feel like a lot of people just won't accept that, But yeah, I kind of agree. They were going for the point of view thing with those two episodes specifically.
Whatever the R word was, yeah.
But
which
like,
is something Star Wars has done before, where they've used influencing of other movies or TV or whatever to influence Star Wars and stuff. So
they have like famously like The Last Jedi. It put a commentary on that with the different versions of what happened that night, and then we see the real version. And I know that there's a lot of people that do understand that, but there was a lot of people that didn't understand that, and that was one of the reasons they hated those parts. So when it was starting to happen in the Acolyte, I kind of felt like I don't know that's going to happen again, but. Yeah, there's actually specifically I'm thinking of one moment from the Acolyte where we see it happen with May and Osha, and then we see Saul seeing it. We literally see the 2 points of view in those different episodes, and I did enjoy the space and time I had to process between those. Though I would probably agree that like if I were just given the opportunity to come down after this show was all finished and make my changes, that might be something that would change.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah. Well, we might actually jump into some Acolyte stuff too, because I do think a lot of this stuff is going to be talking about Acolyte in general. But we'll get IG Kevin first here with a super chat. Thank you. The future of Force ghosting. Will we know more? I don't know, but I do think Force ghosts is another thing that, to me, may have been a retcon, because I feel like when I first watched the original trilogy, I was in the impression that when you were Jedi and you died, you turned into a Force ghost.
Yeah.
Right. And then later on, I feel like we got more Jedi, and we're like, you know what? That's not what happens. And there's a lot more explanation of how that happens.
Yep.
And you have to be taught how to do it from another Force ghost, I guess. You know, so like,
No, I agree. Like, it's always fascinating to me because what you can do is you can go back and time capsule Star Wars Legends continuities by what the assumptions were, not what's in the movie, but what the assumptions about what's in the movie are. Like, what is Force Ghost? Because if you, like, the further back you go, the less the rules are defined, the more freedom they had to do that.
Yeah.
But, you know, even Lucas himself, when he's writing the original trilogy, like, there's a draft out there where Obi-Wan returns from life, or from death. To life.
Yeah.
You know? Which is quite different, you know? I don't know. I kind of enjoy the creative process where, when you talk about the future, though, of Force ghosting, this is me I have to just try to be creative and imagine things, but I imagine you could take the Rey being the last Jedi, the first of the new, that type of thing, but specifically the idea that she can speak to the Jedi that came before, hear their voices, like not just their wisdoms, but hear about their mistakes, their failures, as Yoda talks about. Could be a really cool jumping off point to have, like, maybe Rey create something new to go out and protect the galaxy, and it's not Jedi. Let's just say that. It might very well just be Jedi.
Sure.
But if they didn't, then you could have the Jedi of old be like almost like sages or counselors to what's coming new through a Force Ghost connection through your protagonist,
The
Rey
Force Ghost Council.
Rey Skywalker. Yeah.
Yeah, that could be kind of cool.
So, like, I think that might be part of your thing that you were saying earlier, where it's like, you know, when you're confronted with something new, like, we'll try to make it work. Like, that's me trying to make it work. Like, oh, that could be really fun.
How do you
But
expand that?
if it doesn't happen, you know, if my Snoke theory turns out to be incorrect, that doesn't
If
mean...
it's not Mephisto?
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
I just don't, like, you know, sometimes it's... Well, not sometimes. It's extremely easy to fall in the pitfalls of how we have our fan culture talk to each other about these things, right?
Yeah.
Because it changes. Like, there's certainly eras of fan culture, and right now, like, we're in one that, like, I don't love, and I hate that I have to, like, kind of be like, oh, man, you guys are really fucking bumming me out. I'm going to retreat back, you know?
Sure.
And luckily, I have people in my life that love Star Wars, so I'm not losing anything when I retreat back. But, like, some of the people that we're talking about, like, I'm losing spaces. Like, I don't feel safe, you know, saying the things that I feel. It's just it's a weird era in Star Wars.
Well, sure. And it's weird to say, like, I don't, especially if you're wanting to say that I like this, and you're like, now I'm being attacked because I said I liked it.
Yeah.
And it's like, why am I being attacked for that?
Yeah. And dude, and it's especially the ones where it's like, oh, if you liked it, then you are wrong.
Sure.
That's not how art works. I know it's frustrating. I know there's a lot of people. There was one dude in our comments from the last Acolyte video that was like going hard on like, no, there are rules. It's objective. This is bad. And that's just like, the more certain he was, the more incorrect I thought he was. Like, I think you can not enjoy something, but there is no good or bad when it comes to this stuff. There is only how it makes you feel. There are tried and true strategies to make you feel certain ways, but some of the best I've ever seen gets rid of those strategies and tries something different.
Sure. There's ways to build tension in a film that a lot of things do, and like, well, that seems to work. But then there's other ways to build tension that, like, that's not what's... I've never seen that before.
Watch Mr. Robot every week, and they don't follow the rule of thirds when it comes to composition. You know, they're like, the points of interest are all the way down here, and it makes me super uncomfortable. And that's what it wants to make me feel.
Sure.
It breaks the rule to do it, you know? And I understand there's going to be people that are like, well, they were trying to do this and they failed. And it's like, it's in the attempt of trying. Like, you know, we talked about this today in a video. Like, for me, trying is the key. You might fail, you might succeed, but the idea that you actually get to do it, that's the important part. And that's what I like to experience, and that's what I like to see how it makes me feel when I reflect it back at myself.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's about your feelings and stuff too, right?
Yeah.
Let's jump to SMV, who had another super chat as well. You guys are my favorite Star Wars channel, and I get what Eric was saying earlier because I couldn't help but feel jealous for people not excited about that reveal in the finale of Acolyte. Which, yeah, we should definitely, I think, we'll get into some more of the super chats, I think, but we should talk about Acolyte and some of our thoughts with a lot of the things.
Yeah.
And then any questions we'll look at For the rest of the things, I think maybe not so much retcons, but we'll look at like Acolyte. And we can talk about some retcon stuff too, but I definitely think people want to talk about Acolyte, and I don't want to use up too much of our time and not get to Acolyte and not get to some questions and stuff too. So,
but
we'll get into that
I like
too,
the way, you know, I talked about it, but like whenever someone comes up to me and says, "Hey, I did not like this something," I never go like, "What the screw you?" I go, "Oh, well, why?
Why didn't you like it?"
Yeah, like how does it make that feel? And then I might not even say anything back to them. I'm like, "Oh, okay, well that makes sense," even though I don't agree. And sometimes I won't even say I don't agree. I'll just be like, "That makes sense." And they're expressing themselves because of someone else's art expression. I think that's cool.
Sure.
I enjoy doing that. And I certainly don't try to go like, "Okay, so the way that made you feel, here's why you're wrong."
Sure.
You know?
I could say like, well, here's how I felt about it, or here's the connections I think that there is in this kind of scenario. But I get you like trying not to target the wrong aspect, because it shouldn't really be like a wrong aspect.
Well, because they can't be wrong about how something made them feel. If they just like, "Hey, I'm not enjoying it," or "I'm bored,"
sure,
they can't be wrong about that.
No, I mean, and then the same thing with like we talk about it in TV shows where it's like there is no time for this. You shouldn't be talking about this right now. But that's when you're looking at logic versus like someone who's being even emotionally irrational or something like that too, where it's like they still feel this way, and now it's just coming out because it's exploding.
Yeah.
Whether it's the right time to do this or not the right time to do this, that's just how they're feeling, and it's hard to like combat that aspect because people are going to feel how they feel.
Yeah.
With that, we have had the full of 8 episodes for the Acolyte. How did you feel about the Acolyte? I know at one point you said about wanting to try to go through and rewatch the whole show. I didn't get to do that yet, but I still want to do that.
I did not get to do it all last night. I tried, but I ended up kind of just watching my favorite parts, which was not what I wanted to do.
Gotcha. Okay.
I will forever enjoy the Acolyte for one reason. That lightsaber fight in the middle of the series.
Yeah?
Yeah. And honestly, and I understand that people are like, "But this and this and this," like, cool. The way I do things, like, if you give me, like, that feeling of, like, 13-year-old Eric going and watching, Anakin versus, Obi-Wan and coming home and literally, like, getting, broom handles and fighting with my friends and, like, that feeling of, like, imagination and inspiration, I haven't felt that way in all of the Disney era.
I get what you mean. Mandalorian, Boba Fett, like they're not really going to have like lightsaber fights, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Ahsoka didn't fully do it for me. I think my favorite part in that was the Anakin Ahsoka moment.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That
was
great.
Clearly the best part of it, yeah.
But I was really hoping for a little bit more from Balin. Is that the right name? Yeah.
He certainly has like 40% of his stuff I love, but some of the other stuff I don't love.
Yeah.
Like this was like 90% I love.
Yeah.
And
then
it's
getting
so rare for me.
Yeah, and getting into the sequel trilogy, it's also one of those things where it's like, well, I don't like I like the fights. I don't like love the fights in the original trilogy. Yeah. But they do what they're meant to do. You know what I mean? Like there's emotion
I
from
feel that way now. I did not feel that way when I was a kid.
Sure.
When I was a kid, that was just magic. And I chased that magic feeling.
Yeah. I mean, Luke versus Darth Vader is great. And there's emotion there. And I love when he's coming at him with his anger and stuff too. And the fights they had before that. But since then, like my first time going and seeing episode 1, which I know a lot of people have always been like, episode 1 is terrible. It's the worst movie of the franchise and all that. But the thing that everyone even likes, including Topher Grace and his stupid little edit, which, whatever, is that fight.
Sure.
Like, that was like, oh, man, this is something I've never seen with lightsabers.
Yeah.
And I love journeying into new ways of doing lightsaber fights. Sometimes they're going to be a little slower. Sometimes they're going to be a little faster.
Yeah.
But just seeing something new and introducing the Cortosis stuff for this stranger Khmer character was so cool, and I loved getting the journey into so much of that fight aspect.
I can, I know that, and I'm not saying this should be anybody else's standard. This is only my standard, and I'm perfectly fine with it. If you don't like it, I really don't care. Like, that gave me that feeling again, and I will forever thank everybody involved for that. I haven't felt it in a long time. And that was like such an important part of my childhood, to the point where, like, because I love that lightsaber fight, I wanted to go make a lightsaber fight. To make a lightsaber fight, I had to go get a camera. To get a camera, I had to get some friends. I had to learn how to do visual effects. I got behind a computer. I started doing this type of thing. We had all this camera equipment. All right, let's do something with it. And changed my life. My whole life from
Sure.
those moments.
Yeah.
So to have another one again is really special for me.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that there's some things in the Acolyte that I don't like. There are certainly things in the Acolyte that I think are not good. But because I got that moment and that feels really singular to me, high praise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I really enjoyed that lightsaber fight. I thought it was good. And that whole fight, like that whole episode was just fights, and they were so fun, and they varied and changed.
Yeah.
I also really enjoyed the Soul Stranger fight that we had later in the series, which I thought was a lot of fun too.
Master Soul all the way around. His flaws, the things he does wrong, the things that he thinks he's doing right.
Yeah.
Gorgeous
Sure.
stuff.
It's like it's one of those things where you're watching and you're like, no, don't do this kind of stuff. Like when I watch Anakin in Episode 3, I'm like, no, this time don't do it. Don't do it this time. Let Mace Windu arrest this man.
But I don't think there's like, is there a Jedi that you've like connected with? I don't know. I feel like I connected with Soul in a way that I don't normally get with Jedi.
Really?
Like Qui-Gon's cool. I love Qui-Gon.
Yeah,
but
Qui-Gon
Qui-Gon has
might be
like
my
an
favorite.
element of like, he's a little removed. I feel like sometimes, like he doesn't feel warm. He doesn't necessarily feel cozying up to the people that he loves. He has responsibilities.
Sure.
He has, he lives a hard life, and he will do the things that he has to do because thus is the will of the Force.
Yeah.
He lives in the moment, and he does that type of thing. Soul has elements of Qui-Gon in him, but there's a lot more warmth in him that I don't often see from Jedi that I really enjoyed. And I love that is part of the flaw of being a Jedi.
That's what I was going to say. Is like
Yeah,
I think you don't see that in Jedi because ultimately that's what led to where his story goes. Is that like even at the point when he says like he's going to say Osha, I love I love you, or the love I have for you, but he doesn't get to say that. But that is the flaw in him, is for somehow whatever reason he connects to these kids that he and it could be like a savior. Like what is it, savior complex or whatever it is. Like he feels like he's coming in and saving these kids, and then he can't save May, and he saved Osha, and then he feels like I have to do everything I can to protect Osha, and that is to a detriment of himself. And that's kind of what is like the tragic story of Soul, I suppose, is that's why he's doing everything he does.
It's ironic that like he makes a lot of mistakes, but if more Jedi were like him when they were around Anakin Skywalker, we might not have had Darth Vader.
Sure.
Like,
Maybe,
Anakin might have been able to actually find like love and not have to hold on so tightly to the love that he has and is afraid of losing,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
So I find it ironic. Like Soul is very flawed, but with the right you take those flaws and put it over here and suddenly they're features,
Sure.
And that's what makes it kind of tragic for me, and also just that actor. We just brought it.
I did like the actor a lot.
You know what? Like whenever the guy from Squid Game's gonna be in it, I was like, oh, okay, cool. Maybe it's like a stunt casting or something. I don't know. He's really popular, but dude, like he brought it, and not just in the his timbre and the way he speaks, but like the physicality. Like that guy is on camera doing some crazy stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
Love
no, I think his acting was really good, and his choreography that he did.
And in
I
that
don't know
regard,
how
I
much
compare
was or wasn't him, but the stuff I could tell was him. I thought was really good.
And in that regard, I compare him to Qui-Gon, Liam Neeson, and how like Liam Neeson has like a commanding presence because, well, one, he's just so tall,
real big,
you know, but he's also, oh my God, if you've never seen Rob Roy, Liam Neeson's part of like one of the greatest sword fights ever put to film with Tim Roth and Liam Neeson. It's amazing. Rob Roy. So he elevates that, but I had no idea that this guy could do any of that stuff. And I also felt the same way about Kamir.
Kamir was great.
Yeah.
And I love the actor that played him as well. In talking about this, like we want to talk about a lot about Acolyte, saying about things that we love. Of course, the lightsaber fights were good. So, like, what are some things that didn't enjoy so much about Acolyte that were like, well, I kind of wish that maybe this was tweaked a little more, or I wish that I cared more about this segment, or do you have any moments like that? Because you said there were some things that you didn't like about Acolyte.
I don't think that May and Osha's chemistry, and again, I kind of said it weird, like it's like a double meaning. They have to have chemistry with themselves.
Sure.
Like it doesn't work for me just because there'll be times in the scene where I'm like, I don't really know exactly what she's feeling. Like the best actors, you can look at their face and know what they're feeling.
Yeah.
But there's also this kind of like added confusion / it's the story beat of like it's the same person. And can you have chemistry with a mirror? I don't think you can.
Sure.
You know,
it's
like
definitely hard.
Yeah.
It's trickier, right?
But like what so like just like in terms of some of the writing for those scenes, some of the acting for those scenes, it's not like I'm gonna look at it and be like, this is the best I've ever seen. I'm just like, it's serviceable. It's certainly not the worst I've ever seen. Which I know that the rhetoric of today's criticisms is like, if you want to be heard, you have to go like super hard, So things aren't just like, it was a 4 out of 10 for me. No, it's fucking trash. It's the worst. Everybody agrees, and like everybody like rallies himself up. I understand that happens for reasons, but for me it was like, it wasn't. I don't think it was that great, but it doesn't ruin everything else that's around it that is great for me that I did enjoy. I will say the things around it, like specifically May and Osha, I rewatched their fight specifically in the last finale because I was so focused on Chimera versus Soul that I kind of was almost checking out of Osha and May's sequences. Okay. But I love the intention of like, I mean, granted, yeah, they've changed back and forth in terms of like the color, the theme they wear, but it's literally a yin yang.
Yeah.
And
it is.
Their mirror moves work. Whereas before, mirror moves, like in Star Wars, you see like a lot of bad fan films use mirror moves, like just doing the same exact thing. But it works for May and Osha. In fact, it's probably most appropriate when they're like literally doing the same move and can't hurt each other in that way. It's for me, even though I don't like some of the May Osha stuff, like moments like that worked better for me than what Lucas tried to do in Episode 3 with Obi-Wan and Anakin doing the Anakin thing over and over again. The intention was that these two have trained together so much and they know each other so well that they're moving at incredible speeds and just can't hit each other. But it doesn't look like that because the shot choices
it doesn't translate
wildly
well
incorrect.
Sure.
Whereas having May, the yin yang fight there, that did work for me there. Like despite me thinking that some of the acting choices, like I probably wouldn't have gone that way, or I might have said like, hey, do this. In terms of like the direction, the actual, even though I didn't like those parts, I still can say like, I like these parts,
sure,
and not feel like I'm being some giant hypocrite because, well, there's things that you do like and don't like, but you don't want to talk about the things that you do like. No, I talk about the things I don't like. I just am not a jerk about it.
Sure. No, I get what you mean. There is like with May and Osha, like one of the things I did like as we went through with their story, because like I do think it's hard to have chemistry with yourself, so I think it makes it tough to like really get that emotional impact of these sisters struggling with what they're doing. But also there's this aspect they have now with the virgins, which I know like people have been talking about like it's ruining Anakin to an extent of like he is this virgins in the Force and now you have other people so he's less special. And I do feel like, and we talked about it in the reaction a little bit, of how like there's a virgins that I think is used to create these twins, whereas I feel like Anakin is the virgins himself.
Yeah.
But the idea of like this, whether it's feeding off the idea of the diode like we had with the sequel trilogy, but this balance between the two, and I can understand people having the issue that I'm thinking a mixture of things I've thought, things I've seen people say. There's an aspect of May, I know people didn't like how flip-floppy she would seem. Like, I'm gonna go and find Osha. I'm gonna kill all the Jedi. I'm going to not kill all the Jedi.
Sure.
Like there's these aspects here.
Yeah.
I think kind of bringing in that diode of balance. Like you see more of like as one of them starts to kind of come one way. Like if Osha was just a Jedi and was doing all the good she could, it meant May was like on the Sith side doing all the evil she could kind of thing. And I feel like that's the more I look at it and try to think about it that way, the more I see like as Osha kind of starts to get a little darker, May starts to get lighter.
Sure.
And like the tricky thing is that I think they, in a perfect world, they would have balance, meaning that neither of them could be with the Jedi or with the stranger or anything. They'd have to just be with themselves, which is why I think the Jedi were right in the idea of like, leave them where they are. This is where they should be, because there is this weird balance thing with them. And the Jedi came in and caused an imbalance.
I think
and I love that aspect that I'm thinking of, but I feel the same way that maybe it wasn't shown as well as it could have been in the show. Similar to in Episode 9, I think the I am all the Jedi could have been shown to give it just a little bit more push than just having that extra lightsaber pops up from Rey.
Yeah.
Like the fan edits I've seen where it's like we put the Force ghosts behind them of Anakin and Obi-Wan and Yoda, and it just gives more of a look, they're all here and they're helping her fight Palpatine. I think there's kind of a similar thing where like I think that's what they're going for, and if I watch it now with that idea, maybe I can get it more, but maybe it needed to be a little more like hitting the nail on the head just a little bit more for it. But maybe that's something that we can visit in future iterations, and it's growing that mythology that we're figuring out. Or maybe I'm misinterpreting it, you know?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, if that is a thing, and like you said, like, well, maybe it could have been communicated a little bit more clear. But there's also kind of like a fun part of that, like maybe that's something that's explored like better, and it's meant to be like, hey, and if you go back to season 1, you'll see those moments. It's like, oh, interesting, you know? But and I imagine that, like, if that were to happen, you wouldn't be like, oh, you weren't thinking about that, you know?
Sure.
But it's because you have the grace to be like, well, maybe it does work for me later, you know? And, you know, there's a reason that it was done that way.
Sure. And sometimes I think
sometimes it's not.
within
Sometimes it's just not meant to
have it.
Sometimes you mess up.
Well, yeah. Sometimes I think like there is things like when we were talking earlier about like R2-D2 had rockets in episode 2.
Yeah.
Well, he doesn't have those in the original trilogy. It's like, well, I suppose whenever, you know, Captain Antilles had him, he had that removed, you know, like, I don't know why, but I can kind of like, well, here's a reason for me.
Yeah.
But
erase that one's memories and specifically take that one's rockets.
Yeah. Right. Like, I don't know. I don't know necessarily the reason for some of this stuff, but I can also kind of like, what did I feel and how do I put these things together?
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I'm at with May and Osha. I don't know if you know, like you said, I don't know if the acting was the best for those characters. I didn't feel emotionally connected as much as I would have liked, but I think it is hard when it's like, you got to act with yourself or a double that maybe isn't playing off of it as well or whatever the case is.
I was really trying to watch as many scenes as I could last night. And the times when I feel like May and Osha don't work for me is the times they're speaking together. Like when May and Osha are with other people, like I have no problem with the acting. I think it's really just the again, just for me, because this is all subjective, not objective. Like, I'm not saying like, hey, this actress, this professional actress, she just sucks. You know, I'm not going to say that. I think it might be the challenge of trying to have chemistry with yourself, because when you're an actor and you're acting with somebody, you're looking in their eyes and you make choices in the way that I just felt really aggressive, and you kind of like reacted a tiny bit. You can't do that when you're, all right, I'm going to do your side and then I'm going to turn the camera around and do my side.
Yeah.
Unless you
lose that a
like
little bit.
plan it like so crazy.
Yeah.
So I will forgive that a little bit, even though I still will say I don't think those scenes were fantastically acted, you know. But I can, on the flip side, say there legitimately, Aaron, some shots in that finale that I don't know how they did having her fight herself.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. Like some of them, like, oh, double, obviously. But there are a couple that are designed to, like, it's like a magic trick for the magicians. Does that make sense?
Maybe it is some of the Roadhouse stuff, you know? I don't know.
Yeah, sure. Penn Jillette from Penn and Teller talks a lot about magic for magicians is not the same as magic for just the normies, you know?
Yeah.
Sorry, normies.
Yeah, especially the normies.
The muggles, if you would. And I felt like there was a couple of shots in there where I was like, they're really trying to trick the people that know how this stuff is done.
That's fun.
So that was on the flip side of like the reflection things aren't working for me, but there's thrust over here where like the reflection thing worked for me amazingly. You know, it's not so easy as to revolve everything down to just like no, you have to have one feeling. It's trash or it's the best. You know, it's nuanced.
Yeah. I do want to try to, and we'll probably end up spanning into different things and stuff too, but if you don't have anything specifically about Acolyte that you want to talk about necessarily, bless you, Kong. We can
scream when people sneeze. I don't know why I do that. Where did I start doing that?
We can check out some of the, I know we have some super chats and some questions coming in, especially about Acolyte, and we can look through some of those and then just kind of like expand off of that.
Sure,
as we talk
one thing that I wanted to make sure that I cover, because I do rant, is when you were talking specifically about the idea that, well, is it possible that when Osha is feeling a visceral feeling that it affects May in the way that she I think that's a really cool idea. It's literally like pulling a thread, and the same person is going here or there.
Because it's said that they are the same person.
I think a common criticism, one that I do not, like, as a Star Wars lore guy, like I've heard a lot of people be like, "Oh, this breaks the lore." Like I vehemently disagree that this breaks any lore surrounding the Chosen One or Anakin Skywalker. But you talking about that really made me think of like how important, because they are the same person, but they're in separate bodies.
Yeah,
Anakin is the Chosen One in one body, but isn't it interesting that he's two people in one body throughout his life? He's Anakin Skywalker and he's Darth Vader.
Sure,
that's kind of interesting. When you were talking about that, I was like, huh, that is kind of cool. But I like the idea that that's what really separates it, right? Like from this creating life, this one is still a failure compared to Anakin. Anakin is the culmination, and I won't even. It's an assumption for me to call it a culmination because I have no idea how this relates to Anakin at all.
Yeah, sure.
It might, like, we like to think that Plagueis did some stuff and experiment with the Force, and thus the Force birthed Anakin Skywalker and answer. But those are just assumptions.
Yeah, there's no stories, I don't believe, that have any of that. I mean, there's a lot of comics I haven't read. Maybe there's something in their books, but I don't believe there's anything with it.
And I enjoy it not being defined and stuff too. But over here, like, we're playing with the ideas. We're not defining things. We're playing with them. I still don't know if this is this incepted by Plagueis? Was it incepted by the
witches?
The witches? Was it an accident? Was it on purpose?
Sure.
Did she try to do something and something else happened? Did she want to create one body? Like, was the power of two always the goal? Like, we still have a lot of questions with that, but how it relates to Anakin Skywalker, I kind of fail to see how it's supposed to be lore breaking. And I feel like I know what I'm talking about. I don't know how that's lore breaking.
Sure. No, I get what you mean.
Yeah, but maybe I could just have gotten something.
Maybe,
wrong.
And maybe in some of the questions and stuff, maybe we'll have like a different perspective. We're like, oh, okay, this is what we're looking at here. So,
yep.
All right. So let's see what kind of questions we have regarding Acolyte. Let's start here up at the top. Varun says, "Did you have any issues with the directing and writing? Because I did. It brought the show down for me."
I have issues with directing and writing in everything that I watch. I just grant that I'm not the director or writer. Like, I'm watching someone else's art. Like, I don't, like, kick in the door when someone's doing an oil painting. Like, I don't like this part. Change it, I get to the end of it, or I watch I see the final product, and I'm like, how does this make me feel? This reminds me of a feeling that I had, or, So I as much as I can be like, yeah, I would change this and this and this and this and this, that generally doesn't affect how I'm watching something the first time.
I will say it, like, this is, I think, a complaint I've heard with George Lucas, where, like, well, maybe he's good at writing, but he's not a good director. I've enjoyed these movies that he didn't direct more than the ones that he did direct, like that kind of stuff.
Corin Horn was good at mind tricks, but not good at telekinesis.
But I don't think like, watching through Star Wars for me, I don't think that usually is a thing that really dictates how I feel about it. I'm not usually trying to think about the directing and the writing. I'm just trying to think about what is there and what I'm gathering. But I know some people really dive in, like, man, this is not written well for me, or if I was directing, I'd have done this or this. But I also know how tough it can be to do all that kind of stuff. Sure. And I think I take in what's there, not what isn't there or wasn't done that way.
I mean, my goal is to have a good time. When I press play, it's because I'm feeling a certain way. I want to feel a different way. Press play. My goal isn't to, like, be a judge, to come down and criticize. Like, I think that you can be a critic. I just don't enjoy being a critic. It's just not fun for me. So I tend to stay away from it.
I mean, I know, like, Han Solo. Harrison Ford was like, you can write this, but you can't say this. You know, like, he's talking about some of the writing. And I remember watching a clip with Mark Hamill talking about, like, there was this real ridiculous, like, sentence he had to say about, like, seeing the Death Star or whatever the first time. And he's like, they ended up cutting out of the movie, but he's like, it was written, we tried it, it just doesn't work. And some of the lines in even original Star Wars is just, they're a little campy, But, like, that doesn't bother me at all, and I kind of enjoy that.
They're really campy. We love them, and we grant them, and they're 40 years old at this point.
Sure.
But when they came out, you have to understand. Like, imagine, like, the average person in 1977 being like, "I've never seen this shit before." Like, my dad back then.
Sure.
Would've been like,
Your
"What's
dad
this?"
back then,
You know?
when he says like, "Oh, we used to
Yeah.
shoot womp rats in our T-16s back home. That's no
Yeah.
bigger than 2 meters."
But the 10-year-olds that went to that movie, it changed their life. You know, that's how important a point of view is, and the willingness to suspend your disbelief.
Sure.
Yeah.
Tiberius says, I really enjoyed Soul. Still beat Khmer the second time. Another defensive master, hard countering, an uber aggressive fighting style. What did you guys think about that fight? I think Khmer, it's one of those things. So like, I have to look into this of like how I feel about it and what I think the storytelling is supposed to be telling me.
Okay.
I think Khmer was leading that in a direction and was not going to win that fight.
Yeah.
I think like he already had from Osha the idea that May is going to come and kill Soul with his own lightsaber.
Mm-hmm.
I think his goal was to lead that in that direction and to try to make that happen. So I don't think there was a...
I think Khmer fights like Palpatine politics.
Yeah?
I think he has an idea, and if it doesn't go perfectly, he's like, I'll get it there.
Sure. Yeah. And I think he
Yeah.
I think that works because like his style was, I feel like, more aggressive in the first one against multiple Jedi and a little less aggressive, I think, in the second one. And I think that's because of what his goals are or what he's trying to do in those moments.
I mean, think about the Jackie fight, which was, oh my God, that fight is so freaking
Jackie
good.
was really cool.
Dude, that actress killed that scene. But you got to think about, like, just in terms of, like, the narrative, like, she's putting up amazing fight. You know, she's, like, you know, pulling out the second saber, giving a look, you know, like she's feeling the hero. But as soon as she does something he doesn't like, he kills her immediately. He could have ended that fight any time he wanted to with his pop, 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 you know? Anytime.
Sure.
So that's Palpatine to me. And it's more of like I've always thought, and I know this might not be canon, but again, it's about how you make it feel. When I watched episode 3 for the first time, I never once thought that Palpatine wasn't in control of the Mace Windu situation. You know, now that I've grown up and I like learned the intention of the author and other people's stuff, I've changed. But when I was a kid, Palpatine was always in control, and he wasn't being shocked. He was removing his mask. You know, that was always there, and that type of thing. So I don't know. Just the Khmer fights reminded me of those moments of like, it doesn't even matter what the intention is; it's how it's making me feel in the moment.
Yeah.
You know.
No, I get that. I do want to say for Mr. Darth Darcy, who's and I just want to relate this to us too. They said that as a writer, they have a hard time shutting off that part of their brain.
Oh yeah.
And I want to relate that to like Eric and I having lightsaber choreography in our past and
we have
doing
more
videos and
experience
stuff.
than the average Star Wars
We
fan.
often, and I know Eric especially, will like look at lightsabers and look at fight choreography differently than maybe other people will, and sometimes at the same time be like, man, you're real harsh on fights and stuff.
Yeah.
But I think that that's the same thing when someone has more experience in writing. They're looking at it from the view of their point of view as a writer and being like, man, I'm a little bit more harsher on this way. We're harsher on other aspects of Star Wars, I think. Yeah. And I think it's everyone's own personal way of like what their history is, what their experiences are.
Absolutely. I can't remember who said it. It was on X, but someone was like, when I was a kid and I went to go see Gladiator, I loved Gladiator, but the first 5 minutes was ruined for me because my dad is a Roman historian, specifically a Roman military expert.
Like, it wouldn't be like that.
He's like, at a certain
fake.
point, 3 minutes in, my dad leads to me. He's like, this flanking is bullshit. So yeah, like the more you know about something, the more you think could be wrong. Because sometimes, the more you know, like you become really confident, and then when you're wrong, you know, what's the name of that? The Dunning-Kruger effect. People have been saying it a lot in politics lately. But yeah, like fight nerds, people that do nothing but watch fights, are going to watch a fight from Lucifer, the show Lucifer, very differently than a casual fan. Yeah, you know, and I think that's fair. Yeah, it's a magician that goes to see a magic show is going to see it differently.
Look at it differently.
Very differently.
For sure.
And that's a point of view.
Back into the questions, and thank you guys for questions and everything too. Shad Vizsla,
thank you so much.
Says, what was your favorite part of the show now that it's over? The Jedi Slaughter in Episode 5 and the Plagueis reveal were great for me. Honorable mention for the bleeding of the crystal. And we haven't really talked about the Plagueis aspect of it, except for in the reaction and whatnot. Yeah. I really think our favorite parts are probably the lightsaber fights.
Yeah.
And I know like there's a lot of people who like
Plagueis is cool.
they don't like the show, but they love the lightsaber
Yes.
fights.
Plagueis is cool, but I mean that's a question that we've had since the beginning of being like, oh, there's a Sith. How does this relate to the Sith we know? The only Sith we know around this time period is Plagueis, movie canon-wise, and then there's also like the idea of his master and stuff like that.
Sure.
So just having Plagueis in here just like teases you the idea like, hey, these questions that you have, like we do have answers. It's not important to the characters right now, but with him coming out and looking off and being like, does that motherfucker have a student? That's just me assuming, you know.
Well, sure. And
Like,
it's
does
just,
Kamir know he's there? Does he know he
it's
has a roommate?
Empire Strikes Back, whenever Obi-Wan goes like, that kid's our last hope, and
Yeah.
Yoda goes, no, there is another. It's
Yeah.
like, wait, what? Who's the other? What do you mean there's another? You know, it's like, well, that's
Yeah.
not important right now. We're gonna go to Bespin and finish this story.
And
You
when
know?
Lucas
Like,
wrote that, he intended it to be someone else, not Leia. Isn't that crazy?
it is.
It's crazy. But when you watch it now, you for sure know Yoda is talking about Leia.
Yeah.
That right there is the magic for me.
Sure.
I love that.
Well, it's recontextualizing Alec Guinness's, I don't know, whatever acting. I don't know what exactly he's doing in the moment.
Yeah.
Whenever he's talking about Clone Wars and Anakin and all that stuff, and then being like, oh man, this is what his face is saying right now.
Yeah.
But it's what you're thinking because you've watched the prequels, and now you're putting that weight there.
Yeah. Which is exactly what Soul did when he killed that mother.
Sure.
Here's what I thought happened, and he acted when he saw this witch lady
Turn
turn to dust.
Dust or
you
whatever,
know?
yeah, whatever she was doing. The Fat Bandicoot says, "What are your thoughts on the Force being called a thread?" I don't. So I am one of the people who really enjoy the idea of like there is the Force. The Force is a thing.
Yeah.
The Force is what the Jedi call it. There's, there's magics, and that might be what the Dathomirian witches call it.
Yeah.
There's the thread, which is what these witches call it. Like, there's the idea of like, even if you look into religion, like if all the religions that we know all kind of have a connection, but they just call it something a little different.
Sure.
It still connects into the same stuff. That's how I feel like the thread is. I feel like that's whatever words they have, because they're kind of isolated on their own. For whatever reason, they don't call it the Force, they call it this. And I kind of like having these different religion aspects built around the same idea. It's just said differently between Bardatans, between witches, between Jedi, between Sith, and they use it differently.
Yeah.
And I like that as like, here's what the Force is, but even still, there's aspects of the Force that even the Jedi don't know, but these witches know how to do it. You know, like that kind of stuff.
The old Legends stories with Jason Solo, like before he becomes... Before stuff happens, I don't want to ruin it because some people haven't experienced Legends, and there's some fantastic stories out there that they should go and check out. But
Gotcha.
Jason Solo in those stories has kind of like a sabbatical where he's like, hey, some stuff has happened. I kind of want to go and just figure out where I fit into this galaxy. And he goes and he visits all these different Force traditions, and he's like his love interest is connected with the Witches of Dathomir and stuff. So that's always just been a part of Star Wars. So for me, when I first read that question, I was just kind of like, what do you mean? But I understand where you're coming from. Like narratively, like we've only heard it be called the Force. Why would it be called anything else? But I would say it's less realistic if it's only called one thing by everybody.
By everyone in the universe.
That doesn't make sense.
Or in the galaxy, I guess.
Yeah, like just the nature of how languages work, how ideas form, how ideas can become separate from individuals and stuff like that. It makes far more sense. If anything, we don't have enough different names.
Yeah. No. First time seeing like getting to see like the Dathomirian witches doing their stuff, and then like seeing like Palpatine and Rebels do like some similar kind of things, and it's like, oh dude, this is some. And then getting to the world between worlds, where it's like, what is this? Or going with Yoda to like this other planet where there's these mask people that all have like different emotion masks, and I'm like, what is this? Like, well, it's a Force. I was like, I don't understand what that means. Like, yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
Who are the Mortis gods? I mean, I don't know. Were they
Yeah.
there? Like, I think so. You know, like there's so many mysteries of the Force and what it is, and we don't know it. And it's fun to like just let people tell stories involving that.
If the Mortis God stuff was real, and Mortis itself was real, and everything that Anakin, Ahsoka, and Obi-Wan did was real, do you think there's a possibility that like the Mortis gods are using like a speaking in tongues like force spell or something where like they might actually be calling it something different, but Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka hear the force.
I mean, maybe that could be. I mean, it's possible.
Yeah.
Why not?
It's interesting.
Yeah. They're calling it something entirely different.
Yeah, because I mean,
the chip.
Yeah.
I don't know what they call it. Whatever, and it just translates.
You know, what I'm super excited for is the Prime Jedi.
The
movie
origin
that James
story
Gunn
thing.
Yeah, that's some fertile ground, and I'm really excited to see what they dig up.
Sure.
Yeah.
Mortis gods clearly speak English. All right. I'm gonna call you Leo because I'm not sure how you say Furious. So I'm gonna say Leo. Says, while I had my highs and my low lows with the show, I think the fighting was some of the best in Star Wars. I was wondering how you guys felt on a more personal level about the combat.
Ooh, man, I'll talk about this for hours if you want me to.
It's
Leo.
the thing I think Eric has probably watched the most in the show.
Yeah.
Over the 7 weeks, whatever, how long it's been for this, right?
It's not 100%. I won't even say it's not 100% my taste either.
Yeah.
Like there's a couple things where I'm like, I think their fluff is a little basic. Like they could have a little bit more Anakin, Obi-Wan, like rather than just like swing, 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 you can go swing, swing, swing. Like just to add a little bit more like intensity into it. That's what I would do. But I am not here to watch what I would do. I'm not here to watch to listen to what I would write or what that type of thing. I'm here to have an experience another person created, and then I see how I feel about that. And in that regard, even though it's not exactly what I would do, it succeeded in almost every level.
Sure.
And I might lay it only at and this could just be an editing thing too, but you know what? No, it's the fight choreography because it has to be. The way that they're able to communicate extremely not super complicated things, but communicating things extremely quickly in editing is some of my favorite parts of fighting. Sometimes you can do that in a one shot, and it's apparent that's happening. Yeah. Sometimes you need 3 shots to do it.
Yeah.
But there's a couple parts in these fights that like they give me the information I need and then capitalize on it like immediately, and there's no lag for me. I know that people don't even know what I'm talking about, but for me, that's a huge magic trick that's really difficult to do unless you know what you're doing. Whoever did these fights knows what they're doing. There's some of the other fights I've seen in sequel trilogy stuff where people are like, well, this is what the original Star Wars scenes made me feel, so I'm just trying to do that again. I don't want that. I want what new. I want something fresh.
Sure.
I want to see Cortos. I want to see someone headbutt a lightsaber.
Yeah,
I want to see lightsabers go through a stone wall, and then the shot is on the other side of the wall as we can see them. We can't see them, but we can see the lightsabers flow through here. And when they flow out the side, it's such a satisfying shot choice that goes right into the next edit. Like, there's a lot of mastery in there.
Yeah.
I don't think that Acolyte had mastery on all departments. I certainly do not. But there's a lot of mastery in that one for me with the fight choreographers.
No, I do like the fights.
Yeah.
I think they're a lot of fun. It makes me sad we didn't get to do some of our work because slowly over time, a lot of ideas that we've talked about years ago of things we want to do are being found.
Yeah, it's parallel thinking.
To be done there. And I'm like, dang it, I wish.
I still got some.
Sure, yeah.
I still have some written down like they never done this before.
Sure.
But it'll be fire.
The Sith kebab was one of those things where, like, when you said that, I was like, what? And I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. I remember us talking about this story and this fight that we wanted to do.
I had so much fun when we choreographed Kylo Ren The Awakening because that was done in such a special time of, like, we'd seen the trailer, but we hadn't seen the movie.
Yeah.
And we recorded that in between those things.
Yeah.
Later in editing, I kind of made the story work a little bit more. But, like, we had no idea what it was like to fight with a crossguard lightsaber. And some of the ideas in there that were so fun to explore. And thankfully, with us being a reaction channel, a lot of people, when we put out the call, hey, watch this little fan film we made and record yourself.
Yeah, react to it.
That moment, is so fun to watch people react to. That, like, the corkscrew that we do, whenever it starts to turn. And I just love that, like, it's a GarageBand movie. We made it on 0 budget, but, like, a fun, good idea, like, fills me with joy watching that happen. So I have to imagine the people that were responsible for the lightsaber fights, like, even I don't know what it's like to be an actor or a director that is part of a series that's being completely panned online and being called the worst thing ever, and you're spitting in the face of George Lucas, like this kind of weird stuff. But universal praise for that lightsaber fight. I bet you the lightsaber guy's like, "Oh, we did our job." Yeah.
Sure, yeah. All right. How about Tom? Oh wait, what's this? There's a thing. Oh yeah, I loved when Yord used the helmet against the stranger. I love it too.
Absolutely.
The Cortosis in this fight that they had, Cortosis was one of my favorite things that they added. The headbutt idea, the bracer idea. Like I wanted one of our things we had in one of our fights was that my Jedi character, I was like, I want to use a shield. I want to have a sword and a shield in my combat style, and we were working on that. And it was. I love the idea of the bracer kind of being that for him.
I sometimes get the feeling when I'm watching stuff, and this is more of a general, not just Star Wars thing, that sometimes directors and writers don't understand the importance of having a story in your fight. Like, violence should change things. Like, right now, me and you aren't violent, but if I just suddenly being super aggressive and in your face, like, it changes things, you know?
Sure.
It charges a scene. But I love when a fight has, like, a story in it, and that fight had legitimate foreshadowing.
Yeah.
With the helmet and the Cortosis. Like 4 times.
Yeah.
With the same thing, but it was satisfying
building up
each time.
to it. Yeah. It was great.
That's magic for
I like
me.
that. Tom Starmont. Okay. What is your favorite thing about the Acolyte in terms of its writing? The idea of May switching clothes with Osha and taking her place was really cool.
Yeah.
Even if I don't love the final result.
Sure.
My favorite thing is, I think, for the writing is what I was talking about. Like the idea, like talking about the thread, talking about who these twin sisters are. I love the idea of how I interpreted it, of them having a balance, and like that is really what's changing how they're interacting with each other.
Yeah.
And we see Osha pulling away from Soul as she gets darker and as May gets lighter.
Yeah.
You know, we see May pulling away from the stranger as that's happening as well.
Sure.
And the confusion they have, and the time we have them the most balance is when they just kind of want to both just be with each other and not with anyone else.
Yeah.
But then you have the stranger show up, and he interjects into that, and then they have to kind of make some choices. And that's what I think, as far as writing, I think that's my favorite part. And it does have to do with May and Osha, even if they have some of my least favorite acting moments in it.
My favorite is the choice to show Khmer as affectionate.
Sure.
We never see that with Sith. We hear all the time
That's
that
because he's not a Sith, Eric.
Yes, he is.
He's not a Sith.
Yes, he is.
He's not a Sith.
Plagueis was in his house.
That doesn't mean
That's
anything.
really good evidence.
Palpatine was in the Senate. Doesn't mean everyone in there was a Sith.
He's a Sith. But what I'm saying is, like, we so often hear about the Sith are about like actually your passions give you strength. Like, covet the things you want. The tale of Darth Plagueis the Wise isn't how uber powerful and dark he was and dominating he was. It was he saved those he loved and cared about from dying. Who does Palpatine care about?
Himself.
Nobody. Yeah, himself. He cares only about himself. Vader can't care about anybody because the only person that's actually capable of caring within that armor is Anakin Skywalker, who is covered by the formed shell of Vader.
Sure.
So we don't get to see that. Maul doesn't get a chance. That's the tragedy of Maul.
Yeah.
Dooku, we don't get to see it, you know? We don't get to see, like, the reason that the temptation of being a Sith, a Darksider, is so alluring is because you are satisfying base desires, and not all base desires are wrong. Like, human touch, feeling, compassion, affection, relationships, connection is a really important thing. And we never get to see Sith really do that. I really enjoyed seeing it here, and not something to be cast away. Like, we read I don't know, did you read Deceived, the Old Republic novel?
With Malgus?
With Malgus?
No, I never read that one.
It's a really fun
Because with
novel.
him and his Twi'lek.
But his Twi'lek companion, like, he realizes that his care and affection for that person is holding him back in the Sith ranks, and it's part of his Sith power to destroy that. But I personally feel that a true Sith chases those desires, and it shouldn't just be about power for the power's sake. It's about what Khmer says. It's like, I don't enjoy the Jedi coming here and telling me what I can't do with my power. It's mine. I do it. I make those decisions. I wouldn't go around murdering people.
Yeah,
you
sure.
know?
No, I agree with that.
But that's why I feel like the choice of making him not just a power-hungry lunatic like all the other Sith have been.
Sure.
Having him, like, feel like he has real desires, and they're not necessarily all bad. But also the choice of, like, having him hold the hand at the end.
Yeah,
having him like when like he does this really sweet move where he like tries to comfort her on her shoulder in that finale too when she's going through stuff. You would never see if Palpatine were to do that, it is 100% a deception.
Sure.
And I could say, I don't know that that's not 100% of a deception. I might learn more about Khmer and be like, oh, he never cared for her at all. It was all an act.
Sure.
But for me, that writing decision was the number one for me, was the affection of the dark side, and that's why it's alluring, not because it's just power for power's sake.
Yeah. No, I get what you mean.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, my answer to that would be that, well, he's not a Sith.
Yeah.
But I do want to say, like, that's one of the things, like, you and I both, like, we like Star Wars, we talk about it all the time, we have a lot of similarities.
Sure.
But I know, like, you were like, that guy's a Sith. And I've been like, he's not a Sith.
Yeah.
If he was a Sith, why wouldn't he just say he's a Sith? Instead of saying, you guys would probably call me a Sith.
Yeah.
That's such a weird way to say, you know what, I'm a Sith. I'm waiting for more story from him, because
I
I think there's
you don't
more.
want to get Cobra Kai.
I think there's more there than just like, he's a Sith.
If you were to learn that, well, he is a Sith, you would accept it.
I probably would. Yeah,
You're just
but
leaving it open.
I want more
Yeah.
of his story to see where he's at. Because like, if Palpatine showed up and they were like, well, what are you? I would be like, you know, he's cackling like a Sith. You know, he's like, you know, he does his thing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think he'd be like, you might call me a Sith. You know, but maybe he would if he's trying to be deceptive. So I don't know. You know.
Well, then I'll amend my statement to just being a Darksider.
Sure.
Generally, Darksiders are obsessed with power and control. And I think that you can say that Khmer is obsessed with control.
Sure.
Well, but I don't think he's necessarily obsessed with power.
Same you could say with Anakin. It was like, well, he had emotion and stuff when he turned to the dark side. But is he looking at emotion and wanting to save Padme, or is he worried about the control he's losing and not being able to save Padme and not being able to, you know, like, well, I would make the Senate do this. You know, like he's taking control. Yeah. And like you can say it's a lot of emotion and care he has, but it's also a lot about control that he wants to have as well.
Yeah. And I'll also say that even though that's my favorite part, if later it comes out and says, actually, that was all a trick, I would also enjoy that too, because it means it got me.
Sure.
Palpatine never got me when I was watching it. Even when I was a kid. Like, I know, you know. Yeah. I know he's bad.
Yeah, it's him. He's right there.
I never given myself a chance to be seduced.
I'm also, like, I also look at, like, people, just because they have a red lightsaber, I don't assume that they're a Sith. I think there's a lot of wiggle room with that, right? Like, I don't think Savage Opress is a Sith.
Yeah.
I think he was being trained to be an assassin and, you know, help Count Dooku. But
not everybody that has a tomahawk is Native American.
Sure. Yeah, that kind of thing. So I want to see what his story is, and I will say that I liked him a lot. He's one of my favorite parts of The Acolyte.
Sure. Yeah.
All right, we have some super chats I want to go through and talk about those before we wrap things up as well.
We could talk about this for hours. I'm sorry.
Atarka71 says, I'll give a good example of changing continuity.
Okay.
Kishimoto made Itachi very evil in the beginning of Naruto. Original plan full-on villain, and then changed him later on and added more to his character.
Yeah.
There's a lot more character there, yeah. I like that. I like what they do with him a lot.
Continuity.
Yeah.
It's a vital tool in an author's tool belt.
Sure. And I think some of those things too, like you were saying, like it's a retro continuity change to make Leia the sister.
Yeah.
But not to us, because we didn't know what the alternative was, right? So that was like from the author's point of view, he's like, well, I better change this because I'll just make it Leia. But then there's other things where it's like, well, this already came out. So it's like, well, how does Leia remember, you know, Padme? Shh, don't say nothing.
You really got to push and maybe wet down the puzzle pieces a little bit.
Yeah,
really
right.
Get them in there.
Like, well, she had real good empathy force powers in the womb and could sense it. And then when she died, she could sense how sad she was, that she was dying. Because she died from sadness.
That's dumb.
A broken heart.
But I love it. I love that that's like the answer.
Yeah. What else you got?
Because, look, we all love these stories. They're really fun. They're movies and TV shows about space wizards. They're not to be taken that seriously. They're to be enjoyed and to think about and to make you feel. But when you're done, you got to go back to your own life. Maybe you take some of those lessons with you in your own life. But it's not the end of the world if it doesn't work all the time. Just like it didn't work in Return of the Jedi.
Sure.
Compared to the prequel stuff, you know.
Mr. C. Jalili says, I'm also working through the High Republic books. How far are you guys, and how are you finding them? I'm up to the Cataclysm, and I've already read The Light of the Jedi and The Rising Storm.
Cool.
We have read Light of the Jedi, Rising Storm, Into the Dark, Test of Courage, Race to Crashpoint Tower.
And at this point, two volumes of comic books.
Yeah. There's like 10 comic books or so.
It
total.
was High Republic, like Adventures, Volume 1, and then, I don't know, the naming convention was strange on them.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But yeah, so that's what we've done so far at High Republic. And the next book is not going to be High Republic, so
Battlefront 2.
Inferno. Caleb with a super chat. To me, with retcons in Star Wars, it is okay if it's not consistent. It's tall tales around a campfire.
Yeah.
One has it one way and one another.
Yeah.
That's the very nature of myth.
Absolutely.
Especially when it comes to legends, I think.
Yeah.
Like, I love the idea of, like, legends could be looked at as legends within the Star Wars canon.
Yeah.
And so, like, wow, these were old stories of... It's like talking about, like, Luke Skywalker in the canon. We're like, ooh, Luke Skywalker, he's going to come and save us. It's like, man, he did it. He stopped his dad at the Death Star one time, you know, but he had a lot of help, too. He's not all-powerful. And so, I don't know.
I think that's a great point, like especially tall tales around the campfire, because what you're going to hear that story, and then whenever you're telling that story around your campfire, you might change a little bit. It's like, actually, I like this story if it goes this way a little bit, and now suddenly the story is a little bit different, you know? And then someone that hears both of those stories, well, which one's the right one? It's like, it doesn't matter. It's just how the story made you feel when you were being told it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and these are just stories being told from a certain point of view.
From a certain point of view.
Shad Vizsla with a super chat says, this is off topic, but future canon books I recommend after Catalyst are Lost Stars, the Certain Point of View books, and the Ronin Visions novel.
Yeah, the Ronin Visions novel. I heard good things. I've heard amazing things about Lost Stars.
Yeah?
People love Lost Stars. Certain Point of View, I think, is more anthology stuff, but Lost Stars, I think, is more of like a interweaved thread thing where it's like you don't see these characters over here, but they're around for these. I think that's what Certain Point of View and maybe Lost Stars is kind of both. I'm not sure. I want to get to them too.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know much about Lost Stars or anything, but I all those are names I've at least heard. So and I want to do the Last Ronin. That's the one based off the Visions.
That's based off the first Visions episode.
Yeah, which sounds cool.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've killed a Jedi. Do you remember that one lady at the Star Wars Celebration that had the umbrella in the costume? Dude, she was so cool.
Yeah, it's sweet. Mr. CJ Lilly says Obi-Wan had a girlfriend, and if she had said she loved him, he'd have left the Order. Also feel that if they get second season, they can fix things like in the Clone Wars. It took a few seasons to get it.
Sure. I mean, I think words like fix things, I mean, I don't think retcons necessarily fix stuff. It's just a tool for a storyteller to continue their story. Like, fix implies that's broken. I don't think stories are broken. They're told in a way that either you respond to or you don't.
Sure, right.
I mean,
the idea of retcon, I mean, really, it should just be, what's the ret part?
Retroactive.
Retroactive, yeah. Like, really what I want is, rather than continuity, is I feel like most of the things are contextualizing. And that's what I like a lot, is a lot of things. Like, I feel like it's recontextualizing why the clones turned on the Jedi. They had an inhibitor chip, rather than retroactively changing the continuity. I feel like the continuity is still the same. That doesn't change anything. So, like, Obi-Wan having a girlfriend, or
if Commander Cody said, like open fire, and this is completely my choice, and I'm not being, like, then I'd be like, okay, they broke canon.
Sure, yeah. Like, that has changed the continuity of what I knew. But
because
sometimes a lot of things...
Because he didn't say that, there's room for subtlety, and there's room for expansion, and there's room for, would you like to know more? Yes.
Yeah. Sure. Josh Tate, I adored this show. THR is my favorite era of Star Wars at the moment, so the High Republic. Such a unique Sith and apprentice relationship. Can't wait to see you all again in Japan.
Yes,
man.
Josh.
I'm excited to go to Japan. I don't remember any Sith in the Acolyte except for maybe Plagueis, but yeah, I get your point.
You weren't even assuming that was Plagueis. Remember?
I was making sure. I want to be sure. Well, also, too, one of the things, whenever I first watched it, I'm like, okay, Plagueis, he's a Mun. So the first thing I was thinking of is, like, where's his long nose? Should be long with a nose. And I'm like, he looks more like a Duros, because I felt like it was a bump there.
Yeah.
But then when we were looking up, like, different versions of, like, Muns and what they look like, some of them have more of, like, the nose that we have, and some don't have that.
And there's
so
also,
I was like, okay, well, I guess this guy he don't have that.
Sure. And there's also just, like, differences in mediums and artisan renditions and stuff like that, where it's
This one's from a comic.
Yeah.
This one's from Clone Wars.
Yeah.
You know, whatever. And it's just.
I mean, if you want to, we can find contradictions in how alien species are represented.
Yeah.
if you
but
want.
the one thing that was fairly consistent was they always had 2 real long fingers, and that's what they showed there. So I'm like,
Yes,
you know
they
what?
did.
That's probably who he is, but maybe. No.
When I think of the Mun, man, dude, if we do season 2, we can do Banking Clan shit. Hell yeah. I love the Banking Clan stuff. I don't know why I do.
That will be the thing everyone complains about.
Good.
I gotta go.
No,
do
not good.
Banking stuff.
Yeah.
I hate politics and I hate the banks.
Well,
you know?
part of how Plagueis is able to do the stuff, and coincidentally, in Legends, how Palpatine is able to do stuff is because of his enormous fortune, Aaron.
Well,
and you got to have banks.
His enormous 4 fingers. Mr. Domez has a super chat as well. Love these discussions. I didn't like the Acolyte. There's good and bad in there, though.
Yeah.
Just dislike the general sentiment that the thing has to be great or terrible. There's wiggle room in between.
Yep.
F polarization, I guess. May the force be with you.
I'm right there with you, Mr.
Sure.
Domez. Unfortunately, polarization is the greatest tool people have to control you. We don't even need to try to qualify that with reasons. Just look at anything.
Yeah.
It's sad, but it's reality.
Arlen Kells has a super chat. Nobody will agree with me, which, I mean, someone may agree with you.
Let's see.
But I feel like Kamir's episode 5 fight was more control and finesse. And in 8, he overcommitted a lot and seemed more desperate.
I would love, and I say this with complete honesty, I would love to watch it with you and talk about it.
Yeah.
I love doing that. What do you think? What do you think is being?
Are you talking to me or are you talking to
No, I'm talking
them?
to Arlen Kells. Because I don't necessarily agree with that, but I'd love to watch it and have you point out like how you feel and that type of thing, and maybe you'll change my mind.
Sure,
that'd be fun.
I said before my thoughts on that is I feel like the second fight, in the first fight, I feel like he's fighting a lot of Jedi. He's fighting to win. He has to be very precise or they're going to kill him.
Yeah.
I feel like in the second one, he's fighting one Jedi to a means, like a means to an end that he's after, with like May and Osha being the ones to kill him.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the fight's different. But that's also me putting my assumptions into the show, which may or may not be correct anyway. So, but no, I agree. Maybe at some point, maybe we could do like a choreography video where we're just gonna watch these fights and we're just gonna talk about what's happening here and
I don't know. I don't think I'd enjoy that at all.
what they're doing storytelling wise.
All you're doing is saying like the thing that I might want to do most in my life.
What they're doing fight wise. Like maybe we should just do that in general and just go through all fights through Star Wars.
What fight you want to do next, Badonkagong?
Oh, next but don't. I was gonna do this as a general like video at some point. Just like we just sit down and talk.
I'm just excited to do it. That's a great idea.
Matthew Junn says, how do you separate your love for Star Wars lore and content from the technical filmmaking aspects? Rolls eyes now. Hot D and this can't compare.
Sure. Yeah. How do I do that? It's a really easy answer, and I don't mean this to be offensive to anybody that doesn't feel the same way I do. I try to remove my ego from it all. I think there's a lot of ego in like, oh, I didn't like that. This was what I would do. It's like, I'm not here for you. I'm here for this person's story. Like I'm learning about Leslie Headland through these stories.
Sure.
I'm learning about how people make choices and tell stories and stuff. And I want to experience that. If you had your own Star Wars and you're like, hey, I'm going to fund this and do you want to see it? I would try to remove myself as much as possible from it, And I don't always do that. There are certainly times where I'll watch something and be like, man, I know they did that incorrectly. And I could be wrong, but it affects my viewing. So I try to remove myself from it, at the very least, the first time I'm watching something. And I try to just experience what's being told and have grace enough to not say that, oh, actually, you're incorrect. Because one, I don't believe that exists in art. And two, I just feel like it's kind of, you're reneging on the deal of, when you come, don't just tell everybody that wrestling's fake,
Sure.
So that's easy for me, but I understand it's not necessarily for others, and I'm not saying it's the correct way, just that's how it works for me. I have no desire to be a critic. I love critics. There are critics that I love their opinions and to read their opinions, but I do not have fun being a film critic. It's not for me. I am a film enjoyer.
Okay. Yeah. I get what you mean.
And I have no desire.
The
to
general
change
idea
it.
of the question is like, how do I separate my love for Star Wars lore with like, this is technically not as good as like House of the Dragon or like other shows? Is that kind of what they're saying? Like, there's clearly like
so. Like, there's a
visually
there's a
this is
quality
more
change or
stunning.
difference?
Visual like story wise, this is better. Character wise, this is better. Like, is that kind of the idea that we're going for?
I
here?
would say that like if anybody like to do that, you have to create a standard, and in creating a standard, I feel like is a failure from the get-go, in my opinion. So, it's very easy for me to do that.
Sure. I don't know. I guess like
I can watch a cartoon and take it and have just as much fun of a time as I am watching a live action thing.
Sure.
And I can do that with Star Wars easily.
There's a lot of I think I probably have done this for years, I'm sure, but there's tons of films that I would say are probably much more of an art form that people hold high praise that I don't enjoy.
Yeah.
That I would prefer to watch like Star Wars A New Hope over those, you know? And I feel like sometimes like my love and maybe my bias or whatever for Star Wars is just
Definitely
like I want to see more. I remember living in a time where I'm like I have 3 movies and that's all I have.
Yep.
And I didn't read books and I didn't see more stories than that. And then I got the prequels and I was like, "Oh, this is now all the Star Wars I'm going to get." And then I got more. And now I live in a time where like I can get more visual Star Wars storytelling, and that has always excited me.
Star
and then
Wars,
like some, you know, there's some movies like even prequel movies. Heck, I was never a big fan of Empire Strikes Back when I was younger. I liked New Hope and I liked Return of the Jedi. That was my Star Wars. And I usually was like, if Empire Strikes Back's on, maybe I'll watch it. But I wanted a New Hope and Return of the Jedi. But that's different from a lot of other people. And that doesn't mean that I think like, well, you shouldn't like Empire Strikes Back. No, it's very important to the story, and I appreciate all the lore.
Yeah.
But I didn't watch that one as much when I grew up. I watched the ones I liked more.
Yeah.
It's just how things go. And with this, like, I'm going to probably watch and see how the lore is and what it's like, but I'm going to watch the things I like more, but I'm still not going to be like, well, this isn't lore. I'm also going to try to remember this the best I can and reference it when it comes into connections with other things we get, whether it's in the books or it's in like, if there is a season 2, which I'd be open for a season 2, I don't want to forget this because I didn't like it as much as Mandalorian or something. You know what I mean? But I might watch Mandalorian more than I watch The Acolyte.
Sure.
But I might watch the fights in Acolyte more than I watch Mandalorian. You know, like it just things like that just happens. And
But
it's
you know what you're not going to do? You're not going to go over to somebody that's enjoying something that you don't like and be, hey, quit doing that. Quit enjoying this. I didn't like it, so you can't because there's standards.
I need to get an app for that so I can just bust through doors and be like, why are you watching this? Ruskin Tater. I love that name. That's great. Just finished The Acolyte today, and I thought it was totally fine. After seeing all the hate online, I'm just grateful to be a part of a positive community with elegant people from a more civilized age.
I very much appreciate that. Thank you, Ruskin.
And I do appreciate people in chat being like not being
relatively cool.
Yeah. Being chill for the most part and talking and being not aggressive about everything.
Yeah, Ruskin, there's a couple things we have to always remember. One, like the reports are out in terms of like internet activity, like a huge amount of stuff that you see are bots that are designed to like upset people. Like that's most of like reply. When you see replies, a lot of replies are just bots. So it can be very, like, look, we're human. Like when I'm much more likely to engage if I'm upset with something. If I'm like, oh, cool, I don't start typing. But if I'm upset, I start fucking typing, Like some of our worst things are in our, that come out in us is when we're upset and angry about something. When I'm upset and angry, I have to because would you say I have a temper problem?
A temper problem?
Yeah.
I don't know. I probably would have said I had a temper problem more so than...
I would say so too, but I would also say that I have seen you work on your temper problem,
Yeah.
And like I appreciate all the work that you put into it. Like I have a really bad temper problem, but I've made it like since my mom passed away and like conversations I had with her, like I have to work on it every day.
Sure.
Like that's why I think that I'm one of the most petty person I know, but I'm also one of the most forgiving people I know. And there's there's a fun like hypocrisy in there that I exist in, you know? And I bring that to other parts of my life, I suppose.
Yeah. All right. Kyle Armstrong says, thoughts on the memory erasure canon in Mortis. So, like, the only other canon experience we have a mind.
So, yeah, when the
erasing-
father takes the memories, because if you remember this, you won't have done that. I would say that, because you're probably responding to when I asked yesterday, have we ever had that in like live action canon or just Star Wars canon, as
Sure.
opposed to, let's say, Revan, when the Jedi Master the Council
Sure.
takes
They
Revan's,
remove his memories and stuff.
Yeah. And Clone Wars, does that fit that? I would say, sure, maybe. Though there might be a difference of like a Force god doing something compared to like a Jedi doing something, or
Sure.
or
a Sith, or not a Sith,
or not a Sith. You gotta make sure it might not be a Sith there.
I named all three.
Just like how people that are saying, "Oh, this cheapens Anakin," my response is like, okay, these witches did this. How is that all comparable to the Force did this? Like, if I've said this example before. If a priest punches me, and I'll be like, "Dang
What?
you and your religion!" But
Why'd
if
you punch me?
but if-
God told me to.
But if
Oh, okay.
God comes down and punches me, it's going to be a much different thing. You've gone into a different realm, which is why I don't think that the comparisons people are making pass muster at all. What was the first point I had before that?
I don't know what your point was, but the question was like, how do you feel about the Force eraser? And then they connected it to like the Mortis God is the
Absolutely.
canon experience we have with it.
Yeah, I'm really cool with it.
Really cool with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't.
It's been part of Star Wars for me for
There's
20 years.
There's clearly been mind stuff involved in the Force,
Mm-hmm.
Jedi mind tricks. We had Kylo Ren diving into like pulling out memories and that kind of stuff. Like, there's things in there you can do with it. I don't know exactly how this works, but I don't know how that works either.
I don't.
It's the Force.
Is
so-
this the first time in live action we've seen like a Force user float? Like
live action?
as flying.
I mean, yeah, because like Palpatine kind of falls during the Senate fight.
Yeah, but he ain't floating.
I think. Okay, you might remember this more than I did, but whenever Count Dooku was training Ventress in the not the actual Clone Wars, but in the
Genndy Teriyaki
yeah.
one.
I feel like
He
he was
floats.
floating around in that one.
Not canon.
But yeah, but it's not canon. But that's
Another one too, I guess.
I can't really think of many other situations of like floating. But maybe he just like control felled.
Yeah.
Because they kind of floated down to the ground in that final fight. Maybe he was like in a tree and it just looked like he was floating, but really he was just like slow feather falling.
Feather falling.
You know, I don't know. But like if he just took off and just was like,
Yeah.
I'm like, the hell was that? That was new.
Yeah, that would be new. But would it be unexpected if you can do that with an object? You could theoretically do it with yourself,
I mean,
right?
maybe,
Like,
sure. I don't know.
But
Depends on your
it's one of those
control.
things where it's like taste and standards. Like, oh, they shouldn't be flying around, you know?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I always taste and standards. I always love when Peter Jackson was coming up with the wizard fight for Lord of the Rings. He's like, I am not interested in having my wizards being like super uber powerful and shooting lightning from their fingers and stuff like that. They're just old men fighting with sticks, And then that year, the next thing Christopher Lee did was shoot lightning as a wizard.
He did.
And that's taste and standards, and I enjoyed them both.
Godao says Rey was levitating in the the Rise of Skywalker.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, I guess in the same way that the one Jedi, why am I forgetting his name right now, in Acolyte, that had the bearish vow?
Oh, Torben. Torben just floated there.
Torben's floating there.
Yeah, he was just floating.
I guess
He was literally floating.
Yeah. Sure. Is it? Yeah, no, I get you. Rey was doing that. She wasn't, like, making herself float, like, flying around, like, navigating 3D space, like I guess I'm kind of meaning. But ultimately, those are weird boxes to put on, so
Sure.
it doesn't matter.
Luke Skywalker doesn't make himself float, but I assume using the Force lets himself balance on one hand while lifting Yoda and R2 and that kind of stuff, right? So, like,
Do
I
you think that's him holding himself in the Force, or him?
That's what I always thought it was
balance.
him doing that, because once he starts losing his balance, he does fall. But like, is that because of the Force? Is he using the Force?
I
to
always
help?
thought he was doing it on.
I always thought he was Force stabilizing himself, kind of thing. But maybe not.
I think Yoda would be like, hey, no Force.
Cheater!
Cheater! He starts hitting him.
Give me your food. All right, Gonk. When you go down a little bit here to the Coves.
The Cove.
Who says my disappointment with? Oh no, hang on. The Coves.
Dang it, Gonk.
My disappointment with Acolyte is it is the first major non-Skywalker story they had a nearly blank canvas, but they resorted back to politics and a secret they used to pull the story rather than push it. Okay.
I would say it's not the first major non-Skywalker story. But I get what you mean on the second part. Like Mandalorian's not a Skywalker story, but Andor's not a Skywalker story.
Sure.
Is that what you mean? What do you mean?
I mean, I get what you mean. Like this, so like those are Skywalker adjacent. Is that the idea? You know, like Luke shows up in Mandalorian.
Sure, but it's not a
Rogue
Skywalker
One
story.
is not a Skywalker story,
Not at
but you need that to have the Skywalker story. You
Yeah,
know, like
but-
so. No, I get what you
Yeah.
mean. Like I don't think that. I think there is some other stories they've had that aren't Skywalker, but this
Do you mean
one,
like that Skywalkers couldn't possibly show up? Is that what you mean? Maybe.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but in the idea of resorting back to politics and a secret, I mean, I don't know. I feel like that's a lot of Star Wars. I feel like a lot of Star Wars is secrets and politics, and that's kind of the mystery we have with another
What is
ongoing story.
What is a story if not a secret to be revealed? Or how do you have a story that doesn't involve secrets?
A story that doesn't involve secrets.
Because generally, like, every day a character did this, then this happened, and it changed things, and like that in there is like, ooh, what changed? It's a secret. I gotta tell you.
I get what you mean. I guess I don't know. Like the raid doesn't have any secrets in its story,
Yeah.
but also like there's not a ton of story there. It's like go in here and fight these guys and get this. I don't know. But then by the end there was a reveal, so there was a secret at the end of it.
I guess so.
So I don't know.
Maybe the Raid 2 will have secrets when we watch that eventually.
Maybe, but I don't know. Maybe the issue is that since it's really disconnected from 1 to 9.
Yeah.
You could do anything you want. I think we're gonna get a lot of that with the prequel movie, where they just like blank canvas. Let's just tell some Force stories, has no connections to anything.
Sure.
But even this, if there's connections to Plagueis, if there's connections like that leads to connections to Palpatine, which leads to connections to Skywalkers, like, and it's only 100 years before. So, honestly, I think the story that they're telling is kind of meant to be. They want to show us the fall of the Jedi and the flaws they have and how we get to episode 1 and eventually to episode 3.
Yeah.
And like while we see some of that in episode 1 and 2, I think this is like, well, this is meant to be like more of the height. This is the High Republic. This is the height of the Jedi and the Republic, and they're two connected. And even the senators, like there's a senator who doesn't believe in the Jedi, and they should because they're the Jedi, but they don't.
Yeah, I mean, I guess when I think of the Acolyte, I don't think of politics and secrets. I think of, one of the core themed values of Star Wars is everybody looks at things from their own point of view. And the Acolyte is one person with 2 points of view,
Sure.
which I think is so interesting. Did it go as far as I think it could have? My answer is not yet.
Sure. Well, and the story of
This is why I want a season 2.
the story of Soul, I don't think is like what's all about politics. It's about his feeling to this character and
His
how that
duty, his responsibility, like what he is going to do to help the person next to him.
and how that kind of falls into his downfall. So.
Yeah.
Mr. CJ Lilly says, just for fun, what's your saber form and stance? Mine is a mix of 257, and I'm a single saber guy. My outfit is now Beskar and Cortosis. My character is called Darth Vortex, Overlord of the Sith.
Damn.
Man, you got a lot.
Yeah. OP.
I mean, if I go with my character Kolvash, he had a saber and a shield,
Yeah,
which I don't,
Cortosis shield.
which I don't know if it has any connection into any saber stances in that sense. But otherwise, I love dual wielding, and I don't know the saber forms very well to know where I fit within any of that stuff.
I know the saber forms very well, and I reject them outright. It was on my list of things I hate about Star Wars. I don't like the saber forms. So, if I'm forced to answer the question, though, Form 2 I think is really appealing just because I've always loved Count Dooku's stance, especially in the Revenge of the Sith novel, about kind of looking down on people that have to have more than one lightsaber blade. If you have to have more than one lightsaber blade, you don't know how to use a lightsaber.
Nope, they can do. Ben Kenobi says, Dave Filoni said Star Wars should be uplifting and give hope.
Yep.
What do you think about it in case of this series?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of Osha and May, I mean, how many wars do you have with yourself? I have wars with myself.
Probably a lot, yeah,
like
really.
all the time. I think that to give hope, I mean, the story isn't over. Regardless if it gets another season or not, this isn't the end of this person's arc.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Is like I don't feel like this story's over. Like if I was going to just watch episode 3,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I don't know. Do I have a lot of hope there at
much
the
hope
end of
you
that?
got?
Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess there
You
is.
have-
There's Luke, and they're staring at the sun.
Yeah,
you
he
know?
ain't New Hope yet. That's next movie.
Yeah. So like, there's definitely aspects where like, if you end at Empire Strikes Back,
Yeah.
there's not a lot of hope there. You know, like the Empire struck back, and I've lost a hand. They took my friend. Like, what do you do there? But I think we need to finish the story.
Yeah.
But if I'm gonna go just based on this one, if you want hope, Osha and May, like one of their last conversations before the memory wipe is like, "I will find you," and she says, "I know you will." You know, like I will find you again. I know you will.
Yeah.
But sadly, that you know that it has been erased, and she does not remember that she will find her again. Doesn't remember she has a sister again. But there's hope there that she will find her again, and that's kind of the hope I think that you can get there.
Absolutely.
So
For me, it's the hope that, like, despite, like, the wars I have in my own mind, I am one person, and I can find a peace to that. I can find a resolution to that.
yeah, two sisters believing the other one is dead. Both of them did that.
Yeah.
They still found each other.
They still found each other.
So I think they could do it again, and I'm curious to see what kind of story we get out of that.
And there's you might call it a little morbid, but I feel like Master Soul, in his willingness to, it's the same way that Han was willing to do anything for Kylo Ren, and that resulted in his death. It's kind of similar with Master Soul, and that he's just like, "What do you need? I'm here for you." I think that he has a hope that whatever journey she's going to go in, I'm here for you, even if it's this.
Dude, his last name was like, "It's okay."
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, man.
Oh, I love it. The Great Scope Villain says, thoughts about the guy Vernestra talked to on audio call. To me, it sounded like Sam Witwer's Palpatine.
Uh-huh.
I think it's either him or his father,
Cosina.
Cosina.
Okay. Yeah. I don't have any, really. I mean, when we first heard it, I know Calvin and I especially were like, that sounds like a young Palpatine to me. I don't have many thoughts. I think it's just a coincidence right now. But if it turns out it's something later, then I would be like, well, I picked up on it. I guess. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, I don't have any specifications of what I think about that or anything. So,
But I don't know. I don't think it would work to have it be Palpatine's dad, too. I don't know. Maybe. It might. I'm not sure.
Wristwatch Addiction says, speaking of Leia remembering her mother, I feel like she was always describing her mother on Alderaan, not Padme.
No, he says your real mother.
Yeah, I don't think so. Because during that segment is all about, like, you know, my sister has it. It's the unveiling of them having that. And they talk about the mother and stuff. And like, that's all around the same topic that they're talking about.
The assumption
so,
of that scene is Luke wants to hear about his mother.
Yeah. Not, what was your mother like?
Yeah.
I didn't have one.
Yeah.
I had an aunt.
It's in thinking that was correct. Like, that could be like that could be like a way to try to like fix the pothole. But the pothole, I can still see that it was trying to be fixed. Like, it doesn't work super well for me.
Sure.
But I can accept it.
Sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I never took it that way.
No.
But I mean, maybe. But I always took, in the context, it was about who their mother was. Because I think right before that or shortly before that, she's like, I knew somehow I always knew, right?
Yeah.
Like there's that conversation happening.
Yeah.
All right. And then I think we're almost to the end here. Gonk, make sure here with Garachi, who says, why are there no counters for force abilities? If someone is choking or holding you with the force, wouldn't you try to break free with a force push? While having disabled Saber, why not use the force?
Yeah, I think that this is one of those things where, like, if you just dive deep into the minutia of what they're doing, you're going to break down. It's fiction. But I think if we want to try to fudge it and, like, give reasons, you know, there's the idea, like, why don't I just use the force, press your button on your lightsaber, turn your lightsaber off? I don't even need Cortos. I can just do that. Well, Jedi, you see, when they're training, they create a natural force bubble to keep them out of that personal space. So you can't do that. You know, like, there's a bunch of reasons. But
yeah. I mean, sure.
If you want to just, like, dissect it to where it doesn't work, you can do that. All fiction does.
I think you can do
Some
it
reality
for
too.
pretty much anything. Yeah. No, I agree there. When doing lightsaber fights, like sometimes that's a thing where it's like, well, let's just do this here and we'll do this, and that maybe that solves it a little bit. But then sometimes it's like, oh man, you know what? Eric could have stabbed me right here. And I was like, well, dang, I didn't notice that. But you know what? I still like this fight here. So
And
it
I'll say,
happens.
too, there is a counter to Jedi techniques. It's called being a Mandalorian.
Sure.
Impervious to lightsabers. They can do, you know, all this stuff that's designed to fight Jedi. We just don't get to see it a whole lot.
BVIS the Nerd says, interesting how you say Plagueis' species as mun, like bun.
Yeah.
When I've heard it said moon.
Yep.
Also, have you seen the Anakin tribute, The Chosen One Remastered on YouTube? 10 worthwhile minutes.
If you mean like, is it like a hero production or something like that? I've seen a bunch of those, so I might have, but I might not have seen the specific Chosen One Remastered. I do love those, if only for watching extremely talented editors have fun. But moon, that's nothing new here. I mispronounce things. I know how they're pronounced all the time.
Sure.
So I'm sure I messed it up.
Well, and even within Star Wars,
Yeah.
like, is it Han or Han?
Yeah.
You know, like, there's different elements like that where it's like, well, it's said both ways at different times.
I know.
don't know.
But you know when it's never said? Naboo. And you know who calls it Naboo? George Lucas.
Naboo.
He calls it Naboo. And he calls it Hoth.
Hoth.
And not Hoth. No one ever says like
Hoth.
Han and Han are said. you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, if anything, I do that in real life, so it's
Yeah.
not me, like, knowing what the correct one is. Even if I said the right one, it's probably more likely that when I think it's said this way, you're more likely to be correct if you just assume I'm wrong.
Gotcha. All right. And I think our last one here is from Kyle Armstrong,
Kyle!
who says, do you want more High Republic era stuff? And then book better
Over.
than movie adaptations, or book over movie adaptations?
Sure.
I
Would
mean,
you rather keep it in books or?
no. I mean, I want both. I love the idea of like expanding this medium to where it's like, here's the High Republic era. There are books like I like the books we're reading for Star Wars, but also sometimes I'm like, man, I wish this was an animation. I wish we got this in Clone Wars. You know, I wish we, explored this in these other avenues of whatever. And they've also done it with Ahsoka, the novel there, where they kind of turned into a Tales of the Jedi. But no, I really like. I like getting a chance to see Acolyte and see all these Jedi and High Republic, because especially for me, like, and I talked to Eric about this before.
Yeah.
I feel like my imagination is much less like internally. Like I have trouble picturing things in my head, where I don't think like Eric or other people have that issue. So for me, getting pictures, like getting comics, getting to see what things look like, helps me more. And this here with Acolyte, getting to see like these spaceships, getting to see the fight itself, rather than it just being like 5 pages, pages, but 5 little squares on a comic, and that's all the fight I get. Like I got to see some real cool choreography and stuff, and you can try to imagine that in the books. I have more issues imagining the fights in the books.
I have a small tangent about that, because you've said this before about how your imagination works.
It's
and
weird.
Stuff. You are so good at guessing something that's going to happen immediately next.
Yeah, I don't know.
If you watched our Best of Blind Wave 2023, there's like 10 times where you're just like, this might happen, and then it happens. When you're guessing what's going to happen, do you see it, or do you see like lines on a page? How do you like when
know.
you're like, I haven't seen one train, are you imagining a train? Or are you
No,
like,
I'm not.
and thus
Like,
a train appears?
I wasn't
or?
imagining any of that. Like
Okay.
whenever most of those things are like, I'll have a thought. Like
Yeah.
in that moment there for the train one, I'm like, well, for one, it's kind of funny if I just say like in a movie called Train Spotting, like you're halfway through this movie, there's not been a single train. But other times, like I'm like, oh man, you know what? It's gonna be this, or I think it's gonna be that. And sometimes like I'm just right, but you know what's not in those highlights? The times I've done that and been just wrong.
I know. We count the misses, or we count the successes. We don't count the misses.
So I have like, I might have 10 like real go, oh my gosh, he said that and it manifested.
Sure.
I might get more of those right than maybe you or Calvin or something like that happens, but
It's
I
similar.
also miss a lot.
Similar to like when people are like, oh, I was thinking of this person and they called me, and you go, whoa, maybe I have some type of superpower. But you don't think of all the times that you think about someone they don't call you.
Yeah.
Which
exactly.
happens way more.
Yeah, right? Tons more times.
Yeah.
So,
It's confirmation bias there.
all right, guys, we went much longer.
We could go longer.
Sorry, Gonk. I'm glad that your battery has lasted this long. I apologize.
I just want to keep talking. I love talking about Star Wars with Aaron, yes, but I like talking with you guys.
It has been fun. I like doing this. So the next one we are going to be having, I would say, is probably August 29th.
Yeah.
It looks like. We have WaveCon coming up, and we have some time we're taking off and everything, so it should give us some time to get the next book done, which is Inferno Squad.
Inferno Squad. Yep. Battlefront 2, Inferno Squad.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to having maybe some more questions. Maybe I can reflect more on Acolyte and revisit it then. And And sorry we didn't get to everyone's questions,
Yeah.
but that's typically what happens with this because we
Sure.
can go off into tirades and
We can.
tirades, whatever it is.
I'm sure the Acolyte will be something that we continue to talk about throughout this next year up until we have Skeleton Crew come out.
Skeleton Crew, sure.
The one thing I want to leave with people is, again, you are allowed to feel however this thing makes you feel. What I would caution people against is creating conspiracies to justify why other people feel the way they feel. Like, we just talked about this for 2 hours and 45 minutes. Like, this is legitimately how I feel. But there is, I mean, whether it's bots or fake engagement, sure. But there was like hundreds of people being like, you guys are shills. You're not being honest. You're doing this for some like ulterior purpose. You like, you know, no honest person would feel the way that you feel. And when you do that, you literally are creating a conspiracy theory. And I would just caution the ease in which people go to conspiracy theories, especially in the time that we're living in, the year that we are right now. It's really easy to like being like, oh, well, it only makes sense if this happens, and you gotta like make up this fucking weird story to have your opinion make sense. That should be a marker where you're like, am I thinking about this correctly? When it comes to real life stuff, that's gonna happen. But when it comes to fiction, when it comes to storytelling, when it's about you know, sharing an experience with somebody, I truly feel like that has no place in criticism.
Sure.
So I just want to leave people with that.
Yeah, I want to say with that, I think that it's fair to say like I don't understand how you like this, or here's all the problems I have with this.
Yeah.
But you don't have to. If there's something that you really loved and someone just came in and been like, hey, you shouldn't like this. It's wrong for you to like it. I'm sure you wouldn't feel well about that either.
Yeah.
I do hope that whatever people are wanting out of Star Wars, I hope that it gets there. Yeah. And that people find the thing that they want, like if it's some crazy mystery story, or if it's like something a little bit more like a John Wick Star Wars story, or whatever it is. Like I hope people get that, and I think that that's the thing about Star Wars is getting chances to like. Andor felt very different than a lot of other Star Wars, and I love to let people be able to create these different Star Wars stories in this mythology, and I'm worried that some things we could have got that would have been real cool, we lost because the fandom attacked things so hard. Yep. Or the heavy vocal fandom attacked things so hard, and then all the criticisms kind of got lost, or it became too scary that people backed away from things. Because like I really wanted to see a little bit more like Solo personally, but I know a lot of people really pushed against that. And then there's a lot of things that got scrapped over time, and I feel like it's because of that. And I don't know how good or not good those things would have been, and I never will.
Yeah.
So I hope everyone gets the stories they want, but don't tell people that they can't enjoy things.
For every single person in chat today that was like, look, I didn't like it, but I'm glad you guys did, or like, that's not the end of the world, welcome. We're going to have a great time talking about Star Wars in the future.
Yep. All right. See you guys